dark sky. We had chosen the night of the new moon for a reason. Everything we prepared for tonight was intentional, and we were just 101 minutes away from putting our plan into action. We had done all we could and thought of everything possible. Even though we would be outnumbered and outmatched, we were as ready as we could be for what lay ahead. We understood the challenges ahead. Our plan relied on many things happening perfectly to succeed. Also, we knew the world didn't stop while we had been out of touch for over 3 days, but we were unaware of what had changed. Many people in Mexico and the United States were working to stop us, while a smaller group was still committed to helping us. Without communication, we had no way of knowing what had changed during those past 3 days, or what awaited us. So we held on to our plan and hoped for the best. The size of our challenge was more than just winning a fight and freeing the hostages. If we managed to rescue them without anyone getting hurt, we still had to get them safely out of Mexico and into Texas, likely while being chased. Did I mention the chances of success were slim? But chances didn't really matter. We had learned that Caitlin's new owner wanted to keep her for himself, sharing her with others until she was no longer useful and then selling her elsewhere. To him, she was just another woman he had taken. My children, ages 8 and 10, had also been taken by strangers, and what we discovered about their new owners made it clear their situation would be far worse. The $10 million ransom they were asking for their release was just a cover. The group had already profited from taking all 3 of them. They wanted me to pay the ransom while hoping to find me to claim a prize for taking my life. I played along, hoping to gain time to rescue them. I would pay much more than $10 million for their safety. So it is what it is. Right now, lying on this ridge in light camouflage, I felt cold. The temperature had been colder in some mountain areas we passed. We had been climbing, descending, and walking using the little natural light from the stars and the faint crescent moon, or our night vision glasses based on where we were. Moving as we were, focused and alert, the chill of the night wasn't too much of an issue. Tonight felt different. Even at this height, the high desert cools down quickly when the sun sets, just as it warms up with the sunrise. On the first night of our journey, we crossed the Rio Bravo del Norte, also known as the Rio Grande, into Mexico just after dark at a quiet river crossing south of Redford. We followed the Nogal River when we could, but sometimes we had to move cross-country when the river took a sharp turn, meeting it again 10 miles later. The highlands were mostly empty, rocky, and uneven. The valley floors were sandy and rocky too, but they had some plants. It was easier to travel quickly on the flat areas, but we had to be careful not to walk into someone and give away our mission, so we moved slowly no matter the terrain. Our first campsite was under a rocky ledge near the start of the Nogal River, south of Portero del Llano. The first light appeared on the horizon as we walked the last few steps in the shallows, avoiding some small traps along the banks. They were there to warn us if anyone approached while we rested. There was also a low mesh fence in front of our shelter, and the traps along with the fence meant we didn't need to take turns keeping watch. This was important since we really needed our rest. Our kind helpers had left food, water, and blankets against the back wall of the shelter. It was only a short walk to the water, so we cleaned up after eating, but we put on the same clothes again. We made our beds in the sand under the rock ledge and fell into a deep sleep. It was the best sleep I had since my family was taken from me. On the second night, we covered nearly 30 miles, and we were again very tired from all the ups and downs. We spent the day in a small canyon north of Chillicothe, hidden behind thick bushes and prickly pear around 2 large mesquite trees. Our cozy camp was grassy, and the trees provided some shade for our fenced sleeping area. A small spring flowed at the base of the rock wall, so we washed our clothes and cleaned up twice, once before bed and again before putting on our clean clothes. On the third night, we had to travel 25 miles and less than 5 miles tonight. If those distances seem small, remember that the part of the Chihuahuan Desert we were crossing is in the Altiplano Mexicano, the central highlands of northern and central Mexico. Most of our route was between 4,000 and 6,000 feet above sea level, but some mountains in the Altiplano rise over 11,000 feet. Thankfully, none were along our path. We carefully avoided all mountains, even the small ones, but the paths we chose were still higher than Denver, known as the Mile High City, which meant the air was thin. The high ground, rocky paths, steep climbs, and descents, along with the need to travel at night under the fading moon, made it hard to bring enough food, water, and gear for our task. Luckily, our friend Carlos, also known as El Chaparral, managed to get some helpers to hide food and water at 3 secret spots. Although the distance from the Texas border to our destination wasn't very far in a straight line, we had to stay out of sight of people in villages and on ranches, while also avoiding highways, dirt roads, canyons, rivers, and dangerous paths. These factors made our journey longer and tougher. In my group were 2 brothers, Clay and Claude Edwards, along with me, Robert Roy McGregor. I often go by Rob, but lately my former wife has started calling me RR. Clay and Claude run Ultimate Solutions, a security company that I helped start, which once provided protection for me and my family. They would have joined anyway because we are close friends and they care for my family, but they felt the weight of their team's failure to stop a kidnapping. On top of that, 2 of their close friends had been harmed by a new staff member, Miroslav Popovich, making this mission very personal for them. If we were lucky, a few others from Ultimate Solutions would join us at the planned time for our operation against the compound. They were coming from the north, while we approached from the southeast. It felt like a long shot, but if we were really lucky, some local tribes and freedom fighters might also join us. However, even the friend trying to make this happen was uncertain about their participation. Having faced oppression since the days of the Spanish, many of these people had become more likely to hide in the Sierra Madre Occidental Mountains than to stand up and fight. Fortunately for us, they had been mistreated and forced to work by cartels for years, and there were whispers that some warriors from nearby tribes were getting ready to resist their latest oppressors. They were said to be eager to fight, but they lacked enough weapons. We hoped that was the only thing they were missing, since Raimundo was willing to provide them weapons under fair conditions. Had he helped them? Would they be willing to join us? We had no way of knowing. More likely, it would be a small group of us against a much larger number of gang members, around 45 or 50. It has to be done. My family is held captive in that place, and their future looks grim if we don't succeed. They say your life flashes before your eyes just before you die. Maybe it's my time, because tonight I can't hold back my memories. On the other hand, the countless colors of the Milky Way on this first night of the new moon are mesmerizing. Maybe the stars are what's making me lost in thought, not my possible end. I am not afraid of dying. I worry about leaving this world before my daughter Grace, my son Logan, and my ex-wife Caitlin are safe from the dangerous group that took them. The watch says there are only 88 minutes until H hour. If I need to take action, it must be now. I lean back against a rock, gaze at the colorful sky, and let my thoughts wander. My family's return after 5 years changed everything. From the moment they stepped out of Caitlin's silver SUV and came toward me, my quiet life began to shift. They eagerly joined me on trips to the beautiful but quiet areas of Big Bend and the Davis Mountains. They stood by me during tough times and got along well with my friends. They were wonderful companions. After spending 5 years trying to move on from Caitlin and forgetting the kids who I felt chose someone else over me, years spent chasing wealth while feeling numb to avoid pain, their return a little over a year ago startled and scared me. They had the power to bring happiness back into my life, or to tear it all down. Their presence, both together and separately, broke down the walls I had built around my heart. It was easier to forgive the kids. They were so young when everything happened, not fully understanding what they were doing. Forgiving Caitlin was harder. In fact, I know that's a long journey for me. Yet, lying here on this cool ridge in the Chihuahuan Desert, surrounded by rocks and prickly plants, under skies that are unique in North America, I realize that Caitlin holds a special place in my heart, no matter how hard I try to keep it safe. The events at Carlos's Rancho del Chaparral led to many charges, including against 3 U.S. senators, 2 U.S. representatives, and several state officials. There were changes in the top ranks of 3 federal law enforcement agencies, with even more at lower levels of those organizations. 2 federal judges will be on trial next year, and the already tense relationships with North Korea and Venezuela became even worse. There were changes in the White House, too, with the president rearranging his team after several members stepped down to focus on their personal lives and businesses. And my life changed as well. I thought of myself as a wise person, But I learned that I had been tricked almost from the moment Robert took charge as CEO. His attempt to charm my wife was part of a bigger plan involving international criminals, foreign leaders, and harmful groups, including 2 drug cartels. I mistakenly believed he sent me away to give himself a chance to win over Caitlin and make me look bad. In truth, his real aim was to have me removed. The criminals, corrupt business people, and dishonest politicians saw me as a barrier to their plans to make huge profits through the company. Yes, Robert wanted my wife and children for himself, but more than that, he wanted me gone so he could change his father's business into operations that involved money laundering and shady deals with criminal groups. My unexpected connection with Claude had foiled their first attempt to harm me in the Baltic area when hired mercenaries failed to get the job done. If I hadn't supported Claude's security firm, I likely would have faced danger in Central Africa a few months later. In both situations, we were prepared and managed to fend off the attackers. However, we learned the crucial lesson of gathering information before going into risky areas. Leaving the business and selling my shares to Robert unexpectedly bought me some time, until the information I gave to the board and the FBI ultimately led to Robert's downfall. The following investigations revealed details that seemed unrelated. The agencies thought I had the skills to connect the dots. In reality, I did not. But that belief led Robert's partners to focus on me. Despite their assumptions, I could not piece things together, but Caitlin could. When she found the hidden hard drive, everything changed dramatically. The sad reality, as I understand now, is that I placed Caitlin right into Robert's hands. My pride and stubbornness kept me from doing what I knew I should have done early on. Sell my stocks, quit, and move on. I knew that I was being sent on pointless trips. Robert was sending me to risky places that had little chance of helping the company. I was aware that his plans to meet with dangerous groups and corrupt organizations could either get me in serious trouble or caught by the authorities. But I kept going. This was my company. I had worked hard to help it grow from a small local business to an international player in oil and gas production. I wasn't going to let the owner's unwise son ruin everything I had built. Then, everything fell apart. I lost my family because of him. Looking back, telling Caitlin to toughen up because she wanted me to take this job with all the travel probably didn't help. Telling her that it wasn't her looks that attracted attention only made her more determined. She knew better. My warnings about how his advances were meant to embarrass me only made things worse. Caitlin was 24, but she was very innocent and had been sheltered. I was 26, but I had already seen a lot of the world and had become quite cynical. We viewed life and people in very different ways. I realize that now, but I didn't at the time. The 6 days since they were taken by armed men outside the school in Fort Davis have opened my eyes. In the harsh light of reality, it's clear to see my mistakes and how they led us here. Will I ever see her again? Can I tell her that I can forgive her mistakes if she forgives my pride? It's unlikely. I might never have that chance. Even worse, she could already be gone along with Grace and Doss. How can I live with that? We spent last night in a secret cave near the river, where the Rio Conchos flows through the mountains northeast of El Granero, a large lake that helps grow food crops and cash crops like opium poppies. It's a dangerous place. The regions of Sonora and Chihuahua are under the control of the Sinaloa cartel, which took over Chihuahua after a long and violent struggle with the Juarez cartel, a group known for its harsh rule. To the south and east, the Escamilla cartel still holds power, but the remote areas of southeastern Chihuahua haven't caught the Sinaloans' attention. Their focus is mainly on the more populated regions to the north and west, especially in Sonora. In this less populated area between the Sinaloa and Escamilla cartels, some members of the defeated Juarez cartel have joined forces with unhappy members of the Escamilla cartel. They have quietly taken part in the actions happening here, far from the busier locations near Ciudad Juarez, El Paso, New Mexico, Arizona, and California, and they are growing in strength. Raimundo Escamilla kept his word to lead his cartel away from its most harmful activities, including the production and distribution of dangerous drugs, the trafficking of young people, kidnapping for money, and assassinations. Most of his followers were not concerned about these changes because they were earning more than ever. They acted as business people, providing what their customers wanted. The illegality of their actions in the United States was a minor detail. When demand exceeds supply, profits rise. Their profits came mainly from two sources: supplying Americans with various illegal drugs they were willing to pay highly for, and smuggling frightened refugees from Central America and Mexico into the United States, where they hoped for jobs, wealth, and safety from gangs and cartels. For many refugees, reality did not meet their expectations. After walking long distances to reach the border, they often faced being turned away. With no other options, they paid their guides to take them far enough into the country to avoid the U.S. Border Patrol, known as La Migre. Some people were taken to the cities they wanted to reach, but many others were taken farther away and left far from their desired locations. Many of the women found jobs as housekeepers in homes, businesses, and hotels, or worked as waiters and cooks in restaurants and food trucks. They often became employees in other places that needed help, as shown by the many help wanted signs and reduced hours in various businesses. The men usually ended up in construction, landscaping, lawn care, road work, fence building, and farming jobs. Those with more skills or education, whether male or female, had different options available to them. Some young women, whether willingly or not, found themselves in tough situations. Raimundo, even when he was not in charge of the cartel, invested their earnings in legitimate businesses that brought in surprising profits and created well-paying jobs for people in Mexico. At first, other cartels and even some of his own questioned his strength and leadership, but his strong actions against those who tried to challenge him quickly changed their minds. I knew Raimundo had higher standards than some, but he was still a risky person. Luckily, he was a risky person who owed his position to me, and so far he had respected that debt. Raimundo and Carlos had friendships and connections among the indigenous peoples in the area. It was Raimundo who encouraged some of the young men by letting them know they might get help if they organized and trained for action. Their aim was to fight against those who had caused their people so much pain for many years, specifically the Juarezistas and Sinaloans. We later learned that Raimundo added a second condition for getting support. They needed to help deal with a gang that had taken over a box canyon north of El Granero and assist in freeing those the gang held. The state of Chihuahua, where I was, has seen many conflicts among indigenous peoples, rebels, various government supporters, and organized gangs for centuries. The current situation with the cartels is just the newest version of this ongoing struggle. More importantly for me, some rebel Juarezistas and Escamillans had come together, drawing in members from other gangs, and had established themselves in the mountainous desert where we were. Eventually, they would attract the attention of the Sinaloans, who believed they owned the territory. But for now, they were small and unimportant, like a fly bothering a powerful bull, not worth the trouble of dealing with. Ignored for now, they were focused on making drugs, growing, refining, and sending out various products, including some marijuana, which was still illegal in some places. They also took over the markets for human trafficking, kidnappings, and hired killings that Escamilla had left behind. This gang was responsible for taking my family and the death of their two guards. They boasted about their actions. Some gang leaders saw my past with Ronaldo Escamilla as a reason to accept their contract, but the main reason was that I was willing to pay a ransom of $10 million for my family's safe return. They planned to carry out the kidnapping and then hand Caitlin, Grace, and Doss over to whoever hired them, but only after they received the $10 million from me. After that, they intended to ambush me and eliminate me to finish their task. The kidnapping at Fort Davis Elementary was well planned and executed. The local police were preoccupied with reports about threats at the school, and then they found the bodies of the security guards in their vehicle, who had been attacked. Hours passed before anyone noticed that a mother and her two children had been taken. By the time they understood what had happened, it was too late. The gang had crossed into Ojinaga and vanished into the desert. The FBI arrived in Fort Davis along with media from across the state and nation. The chaos set back the search for my family even more, and the sheriff could only apologize when Rob returned from South Dakota. Rob quickly contacted Mundo, who found out who was behind the kidnapping and why. The reasons included a new reward offered for Caitlin and the children, a bounty on Rob, and the chance to get back at the person responsible for Ronaldo Escamilla's death. The source of the bounty on the dark web was uncertain, It could have come from a rogue government, a terrorist group, or wealthy individuals facing jail time. Mundo assured Rob that no Mexican cartel was involved, but Rob remained unsure, believing there was some connection. He did trust the rumors that the contract was taken by a group led by Ronaldo's former associates who had separated from the Escamilla cartel after a takeover. The rumors suggested it was revenge for the attack on their leader, but Rob thought it was more about money. The U.S. and Mexican governments issued serious warnings and threats, but when diplomats got involved, any help for a cross-border operation would take months if it ever came through. The DEA and Mexican police offered their assistance, but I was hesitant to accept their help. Too many agents assigned to stop the flow of drugs had been influenced by the large amounts of money offered to them. If we were going to succeed, it would have to be through the brothers, myself, and a few trusted members of the security team. We were heading deep into Mexico, an area controlled by organized groups that were well armed. Many of these groups included former police and National Guard members. It was a challenging mission. Bringing our own equipment would be like starting a battle, so we couldn't do that. We were relying on Raimundo and Carlos to provide us with gear at our next stopping point. They had promised to help, but it had already been 3 days since we last heard from them. Raimundo clearly stated he wouldn't send any men. He and the local groups had a shaky agreement to avoid each other's areas. He promised us weapons, but we wondered if our allies would also be ready, especially since we had found military-grade gear when we arrived the day before. Without communication tools, which we worried might be listened to by advanced technology, we were in the dark and had to trust the plan we made before leaving. All we could do was wait. Thinking too much about it was stressing me, so I tried to clear my mind and recall some happier times. Despite her earlier playful comments to the group, once we entered Carlos's secure shelter, Caitlin was all business. "Sit down and let me check your shirt," she instructed as soon as we were alone. Luckily, the shirt was loose and came off easily. She looked at my wounds, then scolded me. "You reopened your wounds. What were you doing, running around with a big gun and firing at helicopters with only one arm? There are many trained men here who can help us. Why do you have to act like a hero?" I sat quietly with my head down. She didn't expect an answer. She was just worried, like a concerned friend. I finally tried to look sorry and raised my eyes to meet hers. She wasn't convinced and still looked upset. As the excitement faded and pain set in, I started questioning my actions too. I realized I might need more help than what Clay could provide, and I knew Dr. Wang would not be happy. Still, I was not looking forward to returning to the hospital. Caitlin typed a message on her phone, took close-up pictures of my wounds, and sent a text to someone. After putting her phone down, she looked at me with a serious expression for a moment before bursting into tears and hugging me tightly. I held her close with my right arm, trying to ignore the pain in my ribs as she hugged me tightly and cried hard. Dr. Wang called back, making it clear I needed treatment right away. The helicopter pilot who had brought some important guests to the ranch quickly agreed to fly me directly to the hospital when he saw Caitlin was upset. She and a few of Claude's top men came along to keep me and the hospital safe. Claude told me that more helpers would arrive soon because we all knew this situation was not over yet. We had stopped the attack, but there was still a lot of money involved, and too many powerful people were still at risk. Fixing everything would take months if the government decided to do the right thing. In the meantime, we were still in danger. The kids were happy to stay at the ranch with their uncles, enjoying Carlo's swimming pool and horses. But after 2 days, they insisted on seeing their mom and dad. When they arrived in an armored vehicle with security cars following, it felt like a visit from a royal family. The hospital staff treated them with great respect, too. The kids were so good and just wanted to see their parents, not noticing the special attention they were getting. After treating my wounds with more staples and stitches, Dr. Wang scolded me for a bit. When he was done and I looked sufficiently sorry, he told the medical staff to bring in a roll-away bed for Caitlin so she could keep an eye on me all the time. For the next 8 hours, she didn't have much to do because they gave me medication and I fell asleep. When I woke up, I was hungry but still in pain. She fed me and gave me more medicine, and then I went back to sleep. The doctors made their rounds at 5 in the morning, waking me up. I realized I really needed coffee and breakfast. Caitlin ordered 2 hospital breakfasts but asked one of our security guards to get some better coffee. He happily agreed, knowing the hospital coffee was not good. He returned with a box filled with good coffee, bringing 2 cups for Caitlin and me. We thanked him a lot, and he expressed his appreciation for letting him go get it. Claude came by at 9 to give us an update, and it was quite shocking. It turned out the president was very upset about several issues. This included the clear misrepresentation in his briefing about what happened in the Texas Alps. He was not fully informed about the air attack on the former Attorney General and Secretary of State and the following attack on Carlos's ranch. The FBI and CIA also failed to conduct a proper investigation into those events. He was irritated by the FBI agent and CIA case officer who were working for private clients without the agency's knowing. But what really upset him was the involvement of U.S. senators and representatives in plans that bypassed sanctions against North Korea and Venezuela. Their ties to terror groups and drug cartels were troubling, but their approval of attacks on American citizens was what truly angered him. There were consequences for those involved. People had lost their jobs, investigations were ongoing, congressional hearings were planned, and resignations were demanded. The strength of the U.S. government was on full display, but Rob knew some of the people would find a way to protect themselves, and the real issue would only be managed, not solved. Now, lying on a mountain ridge in Mexico almost a year later, he no longer puzzled over what was for show and what was real. It was clear that some powerful and spiteful people had managed to stay in their positions and were still working behind the scenes. Back then, lying in a hospital bed and hearing updates about actions being taken was quite reassuring. Caitlin had been upset with him for not letting the trained soldiers do their job, but he planned to leave everything to the proper authorities. There was no benefit in getting more involved. Caitlin was a caring and kind roommate. For 4 days, she slept on a small bed without complaining. She only left to eat with the kids, get cleaned up, and change her clothes. The nurses liked her so much that they gave her a locker and a key for their dressing room. As he healed and grew more eager to recover, the nurses appreciated Caitlin even more. She had a calming presence. She stayed close, checked on his wounds, listened carefully to the doctor, and asked questions when she needed to understand better. They spent hours talking, and during that time they reconnected and deepened their understanding of each other. As he got better and was able to handle physical therapy, Caitlin became less anxious and more playful. Little by little, the woman he fell in love with began to shine through. Unexpectedly, on the 5th day of his stay, she left at noon with her friend Clay and a group of security personnel. I turned on the TV and flipped through the news and sports channels. I felt bored and a bit lonely, and nothing I saw caught my interest, so I decided to take a nap. She didn't come back to the room until almost 6. I had heard her cheerful voice talking with the nurses about 30 minutes earlier. After some noise from their station, it got quiet, but she still didn't come in as I thought she would. Then Clay peeked into the room, gave me a wink, and said, "Be careful, my friend," before leaving with a chuckle. I wondered why he said that since there were so many people around for security. I knew the nurses had given her a locker to use and guessed she had gone there after I heard her voice fade. About half an hour later, I heard some cheerful sounds from the nurses and their playful comments. "No man can resist that. You've got him now." I almost laughed when she walked in, but her appearance surprised me. She really knew how to make an impression. Her hair flowed down in soft curls onto her shoulders. She wore smoky eyeshadow and mascara that made her blue-green eyes even more captivating. She had on strappy yellow sandals that drew attention to her slim ankles and legs. The bracelets on her wrists highlighted her graceful arms. The yellow mini dress she wore was eye-catching too. It was made of lace over a lighter layer, and it showed her back and shoulders. The dress hugged her figure nicely, with lace that beautifully outlined her shape. She looked amazing, and I was taken aback. She came to my side, leaned down, and gave me a quick kiss. "I dressed up a bit because I have dinner plans tonight at 8, but I thought we should have the important talk you've been avoiding before he picks me up." When I continued to stare without saying anything, she put her hand on her hip and asked, "You remember the talk we need to have, right?" I heard some noise in the hallway and shifted my gaze away from her. I noticed 3 nurses peeking in. "I'm over here, Rob," she called out, but I saw her wink at the nurses as I looked back. They hurried off, giggling. Standing just out of my reach with a playful smile on her lips, she looked simply delightful. I reached out my hand, but she took a step back to the armchair, sat down gracefully, and crossed her legs. She leaned forward, looking at me with a playful smile, and asked, "Cat got your tongue, RRR?" Trying to regain control and stall for time, I asked, "What conversation are you talking about, Caitlin?" She rolled her eyes and replied, "You know, the one where you decide if I'm part of your life or if I need to find another way." "That should be an easy talk," I said, confused. "I already told you I still love you. I moved you and the kids into my house when you needed help. We spend our days together. What more do you want from me?" I asked. She dramatically uncrossed her legs, giving me a glance up her yellow dress. If I remember right, the day before everything happened, you said we shouldn't be together until you figured things out. Have you figured them out yet?" "Come here," I said softly but firmly, moving over and patting the bed next to me. She shook her head. "No, I want you to make your decision without any distractions." I chuckled, and she looked a bit annoyed, so I explained. "It's a bit late for that. You walk in here looking amazing in that dress, teasing me, and then say you don't want distractions? Come on, why not wear something comfy instead? Not that you don't look great now, but we both know you dressed to impress and you did a fantastic job. Now come here and sit beside me. I promise I won't push you into anything you're not ready for. I have things to share with you." She looked skeptical, but finally joined me on the bed after I promised again I wouldn't overstep. Once she settled in, resting her head on my arm, I kept my eyes on the ceiling. I knew if I looked at her, I might show too much. "I'm not going back to the pain of past decisions or the long time we spent apart. Let's start from when you first drove up my road. When you stepped out of your car, all the memories of hurt came rushing back. I never thought I would see you again, but there you were with my kids. At my house. Our kids. I was so happy to see my kids that I quickly agreed to talk about things later, as you asked. I pushed away my anger, resentment, and pain, and we entered an uneasy truce. Surprisingly, the week went better than expected, and I appreciated how you admitted your mistakes to my friends and took responsibility for your actions. In the days since then, you've stood by me courageously in dangerous situations. You bravely acted to protect me, yourself, and our kids, and helped keep me safe when I was hurt. Since you came here, you've continually shown your affection and dedication through your actions, and I no longer question your commitment. While I may always have some lingering doubts like when you and Clay disappeared for a few days, my rational mind knows how much you care for me. So, Caitlin, would you agree that a lot has happened and changed since I asked for some time?" "Yes, I would," she replied softly, moving a little closer. "Then I have a suggestion. Let's get me back home. You move into my room to help me recover. We show the kids all the things we promised, and we'll see where this new path takes us." "Not exactly the proposal I was hoping for, but it's far better than your last one," she murmured, snuggling even closer. Her head rested on my chest and she gently squeezed my hand. She looked up at me with a playful smile. "So, does this mean you're changing your mind about things between us?" I responded by pulling her close and kissing her, expressing all the emotion I felt. After a moment, she smiled and settled beside me, her presence bringing a sense of comfort. We both lay there, quietly enjoying the moment, feeling the bond between us strengthen. We stayed like that for a while, just content in each other's company, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. She moved quickly and energetically, focused straight ahead, ignoring where we were and the chance of being seen. I held her close because of the way she was positioned. I gently played with her body, making her more excited. Her sounds and movements grew more intense. I could tell she was nearing a peak, so I pushed up and held myself firm, causing a strong reaction from her. She gasped and trembled, and then we both relaxed. I thought I heard cheering from far away, but it was probably just my heart racing. She lay on me for a moment before shifting to my side. "I hope I didn't hurt you. Dr. Wang will be so mad if I did." I told her I felt great. She smiled and rested her head on my shoulder, pulled the blanket over us, and we drifted off to sleep, wrapped up together until morning arrived with laughter and a notice that the doctors were coming around. I will always remember the sight of her rushing to get dressed, her hair a bit messy, as she hurried into the bathroom. As I lay there under the stars, I hoped this memory would stay with me for many years. The watch showed T 70 minutes. I didn't see anyone moving around the large house or the surrounding mesas, even with my binoculars. I knew at least 2 men were to my left, with Claude and Clay beside me, but they were skilled at staying hidden. 3 guards around us were taken out quietly by Clay. It's helpful having someone with special skills. There were supposed to be more guards nearby, but the area was still. Hopefully our friends had taken care of them. I felt a brief moment of hope, but pushed it away to focus on the stars. During my second week back at the mountain lair, we finally got to go stargazing at the nearby observatory. The injuries I had during the kidnapping delayed our first outing, but it turned out to be perfect. We got to see the comet Swift-Tuttle and the falling stars it left in the night sky. This trip led to another one at the old airbase in the desert near Marfa, where we waited excitedly to see the Marfa lights. They appeared around 11 p.m. Sometimes they blinked on and off while moving along the horizon. Other times they shot straight up like rockets or they flew toward us before rising into the sky. We watched as they climbed higher until they disappeared among the stars. This experience sparked deep talks about mysteries in the world, much like our stargazing discussions on the size of the universe and things like comets and black holes. My kids are young but very smart, and that's not just because I'm their proud father. Their uncles think so too, even if they might be a bit biased. We also explored an old mine being fixed up in Shafter Ghost Town. It was both scary and eye-opening. It's hard to imagine how tough it must have been for miners working in those hot shafts long ago. We spent a day at the Museum of the Big Bend at Sul Ross, learning about the history of this vast area. Our 5 guides shared stories and information at nearly every exhibit, and soon other visitors were following us from place to place. We even made new friends. Grace and Dos made friends too, though Grace's new friend seemed more interested in her than in the history. He looked to be about 12 or 13, and she is only 9. I'm nearly 10, Daddy. My frown got a giggle and an elbow from her mom, who should have been as bothered as I was. Instead, she whispered, "Get used to it, honey. She's going to be popular." "She already is," I said under my breath, "and I'm not so sure about that." This made her giggle more and pinch me playfully. It was enough that Caitlin wore a short floral sundress with red sandals, catching the attention of everyone around us. But I'm used to it. My Grace is still so young. We spent another day at the Chihuahuan Desert Research Center, learning about the plants, animals, and land of the vast Chihuahuan Desert. Our guide wanted to ask Doc for help, but Doc said our guide should tell us everything first. He would then add any information he thought might be useful later. We learned that the desert is the largest in North America, covering over 250,000 square miles and stretching from Albuquerque, New Mexico to just north of Mexico City. He told us about the Altiplano in Chihuahua, Mexico, and the Sierra Madre Oriental and Occidental mountain ranges that surround the desert to the east and west. At first, these details seemed like fun facts, but after hiking in the area for 3 days, I started to feel the size, geography, and risks of the landscape more personally. If things go wrong, we could end up lost in this desert. Even if we make it, we still have to find our way back to Texas, likely while evading some dangerous people. Sigh. With 57 minutes left, I try to push away thoughts of my body being lost in this place. Instead, I look for happier memories to reflect on. Caitlin had listened, learned, and practiced her caregiving skills while I was in the hospital. Once I was back home in the mountains, she became a skilled and dedicated caregiver. She made sure I did my physical therapy, both alone and with the help of therapists in my home gym. I always worked under her watchful eye, which sometimes felt like a glare. She also insisted we take long walks around the ranch. I was a bit annoyed at her insistence on my quick recovery at the time, but now I understand and appreciate her dedication. Business doesn't wait for anyone, so I spent a lot of time on the phone, but I still did everything I needed to recover fully. Caitlin made sure I stayed healthy by drinking plenty of fruit juice instead of beer. She pushed me to eat fresh fruits, vegetables, and lean protein. I started to dream about a plate of cheesy enchiladas. We had to come to an understanding, though, when I poured myself a second cup of coffee at 7 a.m., and she reminded me that the doctor suggested more water and less caffeine. Clay, Claude, and the kids stayed back whenever she shot them a serious look if they tried to interrupt my workouts. She was tough. At night, she was a different person. She was always thoughtful about my injuries, showing care during our moments together when I could tell she wanted to be more passionate. Maybe that was her motivation to help me recover quickly. Finally, when we flew to Midland and Dr. Wang gave me the all clear, we celebrated quietly while the pilot pretended not to notice. He probably couldn't see much anyway with her skirt covering our legs, as we shared a sweet moment together. She got off quickly, but she promised tonight would be special. Once in bed, she climbed on top as usual, but then wrapped her legs around me, rolled us over, and said, "Your turn on top, and you better make this worth it after all I've done to get us here." She wasn't happy when I laughed and broke free, but she was cheering me on a little later when I returned to her side and kissed her. Despite my challenges, I tried my best to show her a good time. I don't know about being the best, but I had to cover her mouth with a pillow to keep the noise down. If I hadn't been worried about the cameras around us, I might have taken her somewhere else for more fun. But I think I did all right, or so she said when I finally gave her a moment to breathe after a while. Early the next morning, we left the room with our arms around each other, headed to get some coffee. Clay and Claude were waiting outside our door with some wires and gear. We both looked confused, and Caitlin asked, "What is all that?" "Don't worry about it, little buddy," Clay replied. He held up a box labeled Ultra-High Definition Miniature Camera. They smiled at her and started toward our bedroom door. I was trying not to laugh when Caitlin stopped them, cutting them off from the door and saying, "Oh, no, you're not," in a strong, confident voice. She went inside, locked the door, and then came out through another entrance down the hall. "Tomorrow I'm putting in deadbolts. No more sneaking around." The three of us burst out laughing at her hands on her hips, looking determined. Once Clay calmed down, he said, "Then we'll have to move the kids' rooms to another floor. They might be traumatized by your antics." She blushed a little before protesting, "You're joking. I wasn't loud at all." She said this firmly but gave me a questioning glance. We couldn't help but laugh again, and she turned a lovely shade of pink. With her head held high and her posture strong, she took my arm and pulled me toward the stairs. "Come on, I need coffee and to get away from these mean boys." She sounded very young, and we all burst out laughing again. She strutted away, head held high with a little sway in her walk. Just before she disappeared down the stairs, she waved at us, and we shared another laugh. We each grabbed a cap from the rack at the bottom of the stairs and made our way to the patio, where she was chatting with Doc and Coyote, a coffee cup in her hand. We approached her, heads down, and said, "We're sorry. Please forgive us. We didn't mean to upset you." The older men were smiling, and Caitlin was trying not to smile back. Finally, she giggled, and we all pulled her into a friendly group hug, continuing to ask for her forgiveness for teasing her. This lasted about 20 seconds before she laughed and tried to break free. "Okay, you're forgiven. Now let me go." We released her and went to the coffee maker to fill our cups. When we returned, she had her hands on her hips again. "There's something else. What are you calling me? That chica thing. And don't try to tell me it's something bad." Smiles spread across our faces as Clay answered, "Oh, you mean Chica Cachonda Insatiable. You should ask Coyote. That's his name for you." "Whoa," Coyote warned, shaking his head. "I didn't add the insatiable part, but after last night I think I understand why it fits." With her coffee cup still on the table and her hands on her hips, Caitlin turned to him. "What does that mean?" He said, Something like needy girl?" She looked confused for a moment, until laughter filled the air again. Even Doc joined in. "No, I know that's not what it means. Tell me the truth." When Coyote turned red and the laughter continued, she turned to me. "Tell me, Rob, right now." "Okay," I said. "Your Humano name reflects your essence. For instance, they called me Solitario when I was living alone, and Grace is La Mariquita because she moves around like a ladybug. So are you sure you want to hear what your Humano name means?" She frowned at me and said, "Yes, tell me." She seemed sure, but there was a hint of worry in her eyes. "Well, okay. It means something like ever-curious girl, though there are other ways to see it." Her face turned a bit red, and we all held our breath, waiting for her reaction. The name was meant playfully and not to embarrass her. She was quiet for a moment, then stepped closer to me. hiding her face against my shirt as she held on tight. She held on to me for a moment and asked softly, "So is this how you see me?" I wasn't sure if she was upset or genuinely curious, so I stayed quiet, as did everyone else. After a bit, I tried to repair the situation. We could change it to brave girl or warrior woman to honor your courage in battle or... No, she replied softly. The original is probably best. Her answer confused me. Was she disappointed, upset, or something else? I lifted her chin to see her face and noticed her bright green eyes sparkling with mischief and a playful smile. Suddenly she turned around, playfully nudging against me, and addressed the others. "All right, I accept that. I am who I am, and I'm proud of it. Since you gave me that name for my true self, I expect the early morning teasing to stop. You know how it is. I can be quite the handful." Coyote jumped in. "Caitlin, that doesn't mean handful. You're anything but. In fact..." "Not so fast," she said, shaking her finger at him. "Chica means girl, Kachanda means spirited, and insatiable means never satisfied, right? So you could say I'm a playful spirit. I can't argue with that as long as everyone knows I'm Rob's playful spirit and no one else's." With that, she playfully nudged me again and said, "Right, Rob?" I smiled, kissed the top of her head, and responded, "Absolutely true, dear. If you keep nudging me like that, I might have to take you back upstairs." "You don't seem to grasp what a threat means, Robbie. You're supposed to scare me, not make me smile." She was so charming that morning. I hope that in a few mornings she'll be back in my lap, enjoying coffee on the patio. T48 minutes. In 3 minutes, I need to start the first call of the night. It won't tell me who is around, but it will let others know that we are ready. Their response will come 5 minutes later. My call is the sound of a kill deer. The response is supposed to be a barred owl. A kill deer. Yes, I used to hear them all the time on our farm when I was a kid. I practiced mimicking them until my dad said he couldn't tell the difference, though he also admitted it wasn't the most useful skill. But tonight, it would serve a purpose. Killdeers are active at night, and I'd already heard a few calls. A call right on time would be recognized as mine. I sat on the ground with my legs crossed, put my hands together, and let out a loud call. Nothing but silence. I lay back down and thought about the plan for the next 44 minutes of my life. We needed quiet to avoid being found out, but it was tough not knowing if we had any help. Also, we had known where the captives were 5 days ago, but were they still there? Our informant told us they were kept in a rocky basement at the back of the house. But could we trust him? Had they been moved? Was Caitlin in danger right now? Would we be creeping down the cliff into a trap? Would our support hit the right targets when needed? Would I be ready when those things happened? There were so many ways this could go wrong, and we were relying on a plan that was already 3 days old and maybe outdated. Well, a person has to do what a person has to do. We could think and worry, but it needed to be done. Exactly 40 minutes before the plan, a barred owl called from a nearby ridge, and I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Thank goodness! At least we had some help. It was still early, but adrenaline pumped through me. I had tried to calm myself to let time pass, but now my senses were alert and sharp. I could hear, see, and smell the night creatures around me, even if it was just a few small animals like some mice and a harmless snake. I lay flat and used my binoculars to scan the top of the mesa, the valley below, and the house. Everything seemed still. Or was it? I focused my night vision on the valley floor along the small creek and noticed something moving. A deer? A coyote? A bird? No, it looked like a person. Then I saw more shadows moving. This might be a large group of local people joining our cause after all. There are nearly 100,000 of them in Chihuahua, and they certainly had reasons to fight. The kidnapping of my family and the plans to sell them made the news and caused outrage in the U.S. But in places like this, that story had been told countless times in the homes of local families. It had become so common that the media hardly noted it. Maybe it was also because those who tried to expose these abuses faced serious danger. Many others had been taken and forced into hard work, but that went mostly unreported, and the silence was not just about fear. Money speaks louder than people's rights to those in power on both sides of the Rio Bravo del Norte. Los Indios had good reasons, but they had mostly stayed quiet before. Instead of fighting back against the cartels and their government supporters, They moved deeper into the mountains and valleys of the Sierra Madre Occidental. Now that they were organizing and preparing to fight, it signaled a big change. If they were here ready to engage, it was even more significant. So who was behind this? Carlos, with family in the area and friends in the tribes. Did Raimundo make some sort of arrangement? Oh, never mind, we could certainly use their help. 18 minutes and counting. I focused on the valley below, but I felt aware of everything around me. Suddenly, I sensed something behind me. I quietly took out my knife. I needed to be careful or I would ruin everything. At the last moment, I turned and pointed my knife toward a shadow just behind me. My action stopped when I noticed he wasn't holding anything, but he still stepped back expertly. I quickly stood up and saw I was not facing one person but three. They were small and seemed to blend in with the shadows because they wore masks and dark outfits made from unusual material. They had rifles and spare magazines attached to their pants. Some equipment like grenades was also strapped to their chests. Nothing shone or reflected in the dark of the moonless night. One man in front of me motioned for me to follow, and they moved silently into the brush. My heart raced, but I followed, trying to be as quiet as possible. I grew up in the countryside and thought of myself as skilled in the woods, but I felt noisy and awkward compared to them. When we reached a dry creek bed, they paused with open hands facing me. I kept my distance, but the leader signaled me closer. When we were just a breath apart, he whispered in broken English with a Spanish accent. "We are friends of Carlos. They have listening devices and sensors around here and in the valley. I'm unsure if they are still working. The shadows you saw are a mix of men from the tribes. They know where the sensors are and are headed toward the house. We came to update you. Others went to check on your two friends nearby. The 10 Americans across the way came here with us. We will help you get to the valley floor unseen. Carlos wanted to tell you that the plan has changed. Instead of just a few Americans, there are now more than 30 of us, and your friend Raimundo made sure we are well covered and ready. The timing is the same, but when the explosions go off, we will gather at the back of the house ready to go in. The main attack will look like it's coming from the front, but our team will be on 3 sides. As you planned, a small group will enter through the back of the house to rescue your family from the prison where they are kept." I stopped him and asked, "Are you sure that's where they are?" I couldn't see his face, but his eyes showed he was smiling. "Yes, we have someone inside. The children are fine. Your wife is, not well, but she can travel. Do you know who has been harming her?" "Yes, I will tell you now, but we need to hurry. The European man who took her is the main one responsible, but the boss has also harmed her. Now we must go. Is it wrong to hope for their safe return?" I did as we followed the dry stream bed toward the valley and quietly moved along the hills to the back of the house. The men I follow are slim and quick, moving lightly as if they are very young. I feel almost invisible in my dark clothes, but my indigenous guides blend in perfectly with the night. We found 2 disabled infrared sensors and a sound detector, indicating that others had been here before us. We did not meet the brothers and their guides. I figured they were getting ready to attack the left side after the explosions, while we remained at the right. 3 minutes left. Still no sounds or lights. Then suddenly, there were. A larger shape and 2 smaller ones appeared from the back door. Leaving it open, they hurried to our group leader, who pulled them behind some large rocks where we were hiding. The door stayed open, and I heard the larger shape, a woman, say she took care of the guard at the door, but there was another one in the hallway and 2 by the prison. 1 minute and counting. As the dim green glow on the watch ticked down, I grew more anxious. It no longer felt hopeless. We actually had a chance with 30 allies, but everything could go wrong quickly, and finding the bodies of Caitlin, Grace, and Logan is not why we came. With 20 seconds left, the woman whispered to me in very good English. "They are safe in the Rocky prison, but you will need to help your wife out. They have all suffered, but your children can walk and run. Your wife cannot." I nodded and prayed again for the chance to confront Miroslav, the traitor, the boss, and anyone else who harmed Caitlin and the children. While I was distracted by the woman, I didn't notice anything else, but I saw out of the corner of my eye the indigenous men dropping to their knees to protect the children. The sky lit up with a loud sound, and rubble struck the rock wall behind us. Some men moved from behind a large boulder toward the house, ready with their rifles. I kept my AR on my shoulder, took out my shotgun, and moved forward. The fights inside would be close, so the 9 rounds in each shell would stop whatever I hit without causing too much spread. The first man burst through the door, dropped to one knee, and fired 2 shots. The next 2 men stood over him and also fired as others rushed into the hallway from different rooms. I was 4th. I turned left and ran quickly down the hallway towards the rock room behind the main house. Knowing the way, just before I reached the ramp down, I held the shotgun with both hands, dove, and slid on the smooth concrete floor. My speed brought me to the start of the ramp in a flat position, with the shotgun pointing straight ahead. As I reached the top of the ramp, I saw a light shining down on 2 guards kneeling at the bottom near a big door. One guard was looking back at the door, while the other aimed his rifle at the hallway. I shot at the one aiming at me. He fell back. I quickly turned to the second guard, who was turning back toward the hallway. I fired again, and he collapsed. I got up and ran down the ramp, moving the bodies away from the door. I knew they were both no longer a threat. The heavy wooden door was locked. I looked around for a key but didn't want to waste time searching, so I hit the door with the gun and shouted, "Get away from the door! Can you hear me? Get away from the door!" "We hear you! We're all by the back wall!" yelled Doss. I stepped back slightly, aimed the shotgun down to avoid hitting anyone inside, and fired at the lock. The lock broke, but some shots hit the door. I hoped no one was hurt by the shots bouncing. I opened the door, rushed inside, closed it behind me, and took in the scene. My son and daughter were sitting on the floor with their feet tucked under them. Caitlin was between them, holding them close. They couldn't see me in the dark, and I couldn't see them well either. But I heard the kids whimpering. I wanted to comfort them, but we needed to act quickly. Without saying a word, I signaled for them to move to the back corner under the barred window. They quickly followed, with the kids helping their mother. I opened the heavy door just enough to check the hallway. It was empty. I hurried to the window, but saw no one outside. "Can you walk?" I asked Caitlin. "Rob?" she replied, sounding confused. "Yes, it's me, but you all need to listen to me right now. We can celebrate later. Can you walk?" I urged her. She nodded and pushed herself up, using the rock wall for support. I could see the kids wanted to come to me, but I said firmly, "Help your mother and stay behind me." I stepped outside, crouched down, picked up some rifles, and handed one to each kid. "Hold these in your other hand and follow me." We moved up the ramp and down the hall to the back door. "Go out that door and hide behind the big boulder. One of our men will help you. Quick!" I stood guard at the door while the kids helped Caitlin make her way to the line of boulders. A man came from the shadows and assisted them behind the rocks. The noise had shifted to the front of the building. Caitlin and the kids were safe, and I was eager to confront the traitor and the leader who had harmed their mother. I slung the shotgun over my shoulder and took the rifle in hand. I saw several men in casual clothes lying around the hallway and in the rooms. Luckily, there were no bodies in nightwear, and I hoped the surprise had saved our side. There was a spot halfway down the hall where shots were being exchanged between gangsters in a fortified room and our men, although there were only 2 high windows to shoot from. I could also hear some firing from outside, but it had quieted down a lot in the 10 minutes since we entered. Our goal was to win and get out safely, but I wanted Miroslav and the leader alive. They had more to answer for. Clay was one of the men involved in the standoff inside the house. I walked up to him and offered him a grenade from my belt. He hugged me quickly and asked if the family was okay. I nodded and said, "I think so, but Caitlin is hurt." His smile turned serious as he took the grenade. I traded the rifle for the shotgun, moved back a few steps, and fired a shot at the top hinge of the heavy door. It held. I fired again, and this time it gave. I looked at Clay, who nodded. The 9 shotgun pellets blew the locked handle away, and the door tilted enough to create a small opening. Clay smiled and tossed the grenade inside. I waited for the blast, then shot the bottom hinge off. We jumped through the door, 1 on each side, and evaluated the scene. 4 men were clearly down, and 5 were moaning on the floor. Miroslav was sitting 6 feet away trying to aim his rifle. Clay aimed at him, but I shouted, "Mine!" and took a couple of quick steps toward him. I kicked the rifle out of his hands with my boots and hit him hard on the shoulder with the shotgun. He screamed and clutched his collarbone, which I had meant to hurt. He looked up at me with fear in his eyes. I pulled off my mask and smiled down at him. "You will spend your life wishing you had just done your job." I saw him go from fear to defiance as he smirked, "Your wife is great." He never finished his sentence because I hurt his other collarbone and then his nose. He screamed and fell back, and I gave him a sharp kick that made him cry out in pain. Clay laughed at that. As his scream turned into a softer whimper, I leaned over him and said, "For what you said about her, you will pay dearly. That pain you feel right now, it's just the beginning." Clay kept watch over 5 men who had hurt ears, and 2 men I didn't recognize were tying up their hands. He winked and said, "You think you're tough, but these guys know a lot more about hurting people than you do." I pulled a cord from the curtains, wrapped it around Miroslav's neck, and dragged him down the hall. With his injuries, he couldn't keep hold of the cord, and he struggled to ease the pressure on his throat. That worked for a while, but I knew the relief would come back as pain later on. The sky was starting to brighten, and I could see the few gangsters left were sitting on the ground in the yard. I found Abel and asked where the assailant was. He said he didn't know, but he wasn't among the dead. "Oh, he thinks he's just one of us. I have a way to change that. Look after your friend, I'll be right back." Abel glanced at Miroslav, who was struggling, and kicked him hard. "Stay still or I'll make it worse for you." The man who had been looking after Caitlin, Grace, and Doss pulled off his mask and was helping her walk to the house. I crouched down for the kids, and they ran to me, crying. As they got closer, I saw bruises on their faces and arms in the morning light. Miroslav's troubles were about to get worse. Once I could breathe again and wipe away the tears, I looked at Caitlin. She looked different, pale and unwell, with dark circles under her eyes, bruises on her face, and a spot of blood in her hair. But she also looked strong. I let go of the kids, stood up, and hugged her tightly, thankful that they were alive. She hugged me tightly and shivered for a few moments before asking if it was all over. I told her it was, but we still needed to handle the situation with those who were still around, and make it safely back to Texas before we could celebrate. She nodded and said I should do what I needed to do. She mentioned that their new friend would take care of the situation. I looked at the new friend, thanked him in English, and asked for his name. He looked confused, so I tried in Spanish. He said his name was Arnulfo, and that he was part of the Raramuri tribe. I knew a bit about the indigenous tribes and understood that Raramuri is the name the Tarahumara people use for themselves. I also knew that they are famous for being the best long-distance runners in the world, and Arnulfo certainly looked the part in his fitted outfit. As I was about to go back to the house, a thought stopped me. "Caitlin, do you think you could recognize the men who hurt you?" The determined look on her face changed to a fierce glare. "Of course! Can I carry you? We need your help to identify them, and they are at the front." She opened her arms. I asked Arnulfo to look after the kids and lifted her carefully. She felt light, and I could hear her make a soft sound as we moved. I knew she needed medical care soon, but we needed her assistance first. As I carried her outside, Miroslav smirked at her and started to speak, but Abel kicked him in the side and told him to be quiet or face the consequences. She pointed at Miroslav and then spat at him. "I want to be the one to make him pay," she said angrily. "As you wish," I replied. "But first, show me the others." I carried her closer to the men sitting on the ground, their hands secured behind them. As we got closer to the first man, Claude stepped in. When the man refused to look up, Claude pulled him by his hair to show his face to Caitlin. She shook her head. This went on for the next 5 men until I noticed the 6th one wiggling and knew he was someone she could recognize. I gently set her down, picked up a stone that was smooth on one side and rough on the other, and handed it to her. Claude held the man up by his hair, and I saw Caitlin's face change to one of fury. She yelled and struck him on the cheekbone with the rough side of the stone. He screamed and tried to pull away, but Claude kept him still, and she hit him again, lower on his jaw. "You think you can get away with this? You'll regret what you've done to me," she shouted. I looked around and felt relieved that Arnulfo hadn't brought out the kids. They would have cheered for their mother, but still. I never thought of how intense her revenge could be, and I wasn't sure if our friends had considered it either. It would certainly be something to witness. "Is there anyone else, Caitlin?" I asked, trying to shift her focus. I had been told there were just 2 people, but maybe there were more. I'm not sure because sometimes I couldn't see. I was lying down and they took turns. Yesterday I saw a government official and a businessman from another country. They left in a helicopter after they were done. That's when the bad things stopped. The businessman said to let me rest and then send me to him. This upset her again. She hit the leader of the group in the forehead, making him fall back. Then she walked over to another man. She looked hurt as she walked, but made it to him. This time he did not smile. He looked afraid. She laughed and spat in his direction, hitting him lightly on his already hurt nose with a stone. She teased him when he cried out, "How does it feel to be on the receiving end, you coward? Just like you hurt me, there is more coming for you." Worried about her state of mind, I wrapped my arm around her and led her to the porch. I sat her on a soft swing and sat down next to her. "How did the kids get those bruises? They fought for me when they came to save me and got hit by the guards." She looked closely at the men in the yard and pointed at one. "He was one of them and so was he," she said, pointing at another. I got up, walked to the first man and pulled him to the second by his hair. "You hurt my children?" I asked in Spanish. They both shook their heads, saying, "No, no." I looked back at Caitlin, who shouted, "Yes, they did, and more than once." Claude and two other men from our team came over and surrounded the two men, who kept saying they were innocent until something happened to them. After a couple of minutes, they were quiet and seemed broken. The other men around began pleading for mercy. I called out to our allies, "They are yours. Show them no mercy as they did not show your people." The group of fighters returned to the yard, leaving only our security team to watch over things. They moved among the captives, speaking their languages and sometimes Spanish. I caught enough to know the cries of, "No, no, it wasn't me," were answers to their accusations. Claude and Clay walked over to the porch where I stood with Caitlin. Among the cries, Claude warned, "We've been here long enough. There are more bad guys outside, and we are in their territory." Then he chuckled. Clay chimed in with a smile. "We have some good news. Paul Pavetto is coming with a helicopter for repairs, so we will be flying out, not walking. He'll be here in about 30 minutes. We need to figure out what we can and prepare before he arrives. Everyone will see and hear his arrival for miles around. Let's see if we can find some proper clothing for your family and get them ready. We will take care of the questioning, but we might need to check some details with Caitlin or the children." The woman and kids who got away from the house before the fight were now on the porch. I gestured for them to come over and asked the woman if she could help us. She smiled slightly and replied in perfect English, "I know everything. We have been here for over 3 years. I can tell you where the money and documents are hidden, and the combinations to their safes. I know the names of the corrupt officials who protect them in exchange for bribes, and I have the names and contact details for the 2 men involved in the incident with your wife yesterday. They also have laptops filled with unprotected records. I am a proud member of the Nahuatl tribe and a doctor with degrees from Stanford. My children and I were taken from my home village 3 years ago by Juan Morales, known as El Asaltante. We are alive because I pretended to be his wife, and my children acted like his. There were many times I wanted to escape, but his right-hand man over there with the shoulder injury is even more ruthless. I can tell you about the terrible things I have seen and the names and places of others who have come here before, but you must take my children and me out of this country. The people who survived will find us no matter where we hide in Mexico," Claude replied, looking concerned. "There will be no survivors here, but you're right. There are other gang members still out there. We have space on the helicopter and we will take you with us. Now, show me the laptops, the records, and the money." "No, first I want to help Caitlin, Grace, and Doss get cleaned up and dressed properly. Then I will help you. Everything is in Morales' office. It will be quick and easy to get." Justice was served carefully and without mercy. Each tribe member had lost family and friends to the cartels and viewed these individuals as the enemy, even if they were not the specific ones causing harm. If they kept getting support for their weapons, fought fiercely, and showed no mercy to the survivors of the battles ahead, the cartels would have to either attack them aggressively or try to make a deal. I believed they would fight even harder when the cartel members came into their lands and villages in the mountains, making a deal the better option. Caitlin came back with Arnulfo and Ava, and they headed straight for the shaken remains of El Asaltante and Popovich. The 4 children were missing. A big helicopter arrived just as Caitlin was cleaning Abel's knife with the remains of a shirt. I've heard the saying that a woman's anger is powerful, especially when her children are in danger. But what we saw went beyond those words. Even some strong men turned away in shock. Eva showed her fierce side, lashing out at people connected to those who hurt us. Her anger came from her connection to the many wronged people and her past suffering. But Caitlin surprised me. I had no idea she had such strength inside her. She didn't use the burning stick, but she made them regret approaching her and her children. The large helicopter landed smoothly on a pad about 50 yards down the valley, a sign of the serious situation around the new cartel and their plans. What we had done today helped save many lives. As soon as the helicopter landed, Paul Pavetto jumped out and ran to us. We met him on the porch. He shook my hand, looked at the others nearby, and said, "We can carry up to 30 people, but we need to get in the air quickly. We tried to stay low on the ground, but too many people saw us. We can't defend against jet fighters. We need to return to American airspace soon." Those of us wanting to go back to Texas gathered and walked toward the waiting helicopter with Paul. The closer we got, the more impressive it looked. "What kind of helicopter is that, and where did you get it?" I shouted over the noise. "It's a Mi-38, made in Russia and used for construction and transport," he shouted back. "I'm one of the few Americans who can fly it, and I've done several missions for the owner. He heard about your situation and offered it, but wants to stay anonymous. He doesn't want to get involved with your enemies." "Thanks. I'll respect that, but I think I know who he is. He keeps it north of Van Horn, near El Capitan." "I can neither confirm nor deny," he replied, smiling. "Make sure to thank him. He will have some good business in the future." I turned back while he waited with another man in flight gear. Even with Ava and her 2 children, we only had 19 people. Our indigenous friends were resourceful, and their anger toward those who wronged them led them to seek justice in ways that others could understand. After winning the battle, they calmed down a bit and began to move back into the mountains. Eva helped some of the injured, but sadly, 2 had died. One was a young leader from the Guarillo tribe, and the other an older member of the Raramuri. Their bodies were placed on a cart pulled by those who were strong enough to help the injured. Miroslav and Morales survived, but they had long since wished for peace. We wrapped their injured bodies in canvas and placed them in the back of a large helicopter. Because the helicopter was so noisy, the co-pilot made the kids wear noise-reducing helmets before they got inside. This was wise. They didn't need to hear the loud sounds of the engine or the conversations behind them. With a loud roar, we took off. At first, it was exciting. We didn't have to walk back through the desert for 3 days, avoiding dangers, while helping an injured woman and 4 kids. But by the time we landed, I promised myself I would never fly in a helicopter again. Flying high in the sky is one thing I am used to, but flying low through trees, around mountains, and near homes in such a large helicopter was something else entirely. Paul flew us over the least populated areas while still getting us to safety as quickly as possible. We didn't see any other aircraft or threats on the ground, but we cheered when we crossed the Rio Grande. I wondered what the people rafting thought when we flew over them at Santa Elena Canyon, and what the folks in Study Butte, Terlingua, and Lachitas thought when they spotted a helicopter above at around 10,000 feet. I also didn't know how Chaparral had managed to have vehicles waiting on a flat spot in the desert northwest of the desert lair, but I guessed their planning had covered everything. Caitlin kept her composure, but I could see she was in pain. However, her anger was stronger, and she occasionally glared at those who had harmed her. Miroslav and El Asaltante begged for mercy as we began to descend, but Eva joined Caitlin in explaining loudly why they should not receive any kindness, recounting the suffering they had caused to many others. I was glad the kids were wearing helmets, even though they had seen far too much already. Their pleas for mercy went unanswered, and they were unanimously found guilty and given a harsh sentence. Their cries and pleas did not change the situation. 20 minutes after we got off the helicopter, what remained of El Asaltante and Miroslav, the Serb would jump out from a high altitude, landing near an empty school bus stop outside Fort Davis. I hoped the message would be clear. I was sure Sheriff Goodson would understand it, but I wanted others involved to get the point too. I planned to make sure the sheriff had the chance to share this information on national news. The helicopter continued on its way past Van Horn, where it was returned to its hangar, which had crossed lightning bolts above the doors, just like on my gate. Clay drove our Suburban with Claude, my family, Ava, and her 2 children, straight to the Terlingua Ranch airfield where the plane was waiting. I sat in the middle of the second row with Caitlin beside me and Doss on my lap. Caitlin's excitement and anger were fading, and I noticed her lip trembled occasionally. I held her shoulder close, kissed her forehead, and turned to Claude in the front seat. He had his tablet ready as we discussed our next steps. "Who do we have in San Antonio?" I asked. "Esteban and his crew. They're skilled, so we won't have protection problems. They'll meet you at the airport. I assume it's SAI?" "No, the flight plan will say SAI, but we will reroute to Bourne and meet Ramos there. We cannot be sure if we are safe or if they are planning another attack. Let's get to the point. They started this fight unfairly. Unleash our backup. I mean every single one we have. Get more if needed." He nodded, a determined smile appearing on his face. The Edwards brothers were known for being tough. "Verify what Eva told us, then act on it," I instructed. "Post the bounties the same way ours were presented, make it clear. We won't directly threaten their families like they did mine, but they should still feel uneasy. Find a way to make that happen. The Russian may not care, but some of his men might, and the Mexicans and Americans will definitely be concerned. I wish I had more money, but I know some people who owe me, so cost isn't our main worry. We need to go after these thugs right away to create fear among those who get scared easily. Let's aim high first, before they realize we're on the move. Do you think we can pull this off?" "Our chances are better than I expected for this mission. We've been keeping an eye on them since it started. He has many men, but he acts carelessly multiple times a day. If all goes well, we can catch him and his best officers, but even if we can't, taking out some of his key players might still send a strong message. Our goal is simple. We want them to stop bothering you and your family. Clay will take charge, and I will help with information. He knows people who can assist, and he is skilled in handling situations in cities. He is really angry, so you might see news reports soon." We quickly went to the airfield. We helped Caitlin, Eva, and the 4 kids onto the plane, then stepped aside to talk privately for a moment. "Clay, if Robert's name comes up at any time..." "I get it, Rob. I'll inform Ronaldo. He has connections, but if he wants to act..." "If Robert was involved in any way, I want him to face the same consequences as Miroslav and Morales. But if he played a big role in this, he has already used up his chances." "Understood. Consider it handled. Now, here is an unregistered phone with plenty of minutes. Clay, Carlos, and I each have one, and our numbers are in yours. We won't use them unless it's really necessary, but they are here if we need them. Esteban has the best communication equipment. Use it whenever you can, especially for our daily updates. We will be in the communications center at the mountain lair, and the militia is taking care of security in the desert as a precaution. We are all on high alert now, so be sure to let us know if you send anyone out. We will talk tonight after you get everyone to the doctor. They have been running on nervous energy, so there might be physical or emotional injuries that pop up as they settle down." Doss had taken a seat next to his mother, holding her hand and talking softly to her. They both looked very upset. I put my hand on his shoulder and asked him to move next to Benito so I could speak with his mother. He stood up and quietly asked, "Daddy, those men hurt Mommy badly. She cried a lot when they brought her back and could barely stand. Once, they took Grace and me to a room where Mommy was, and they started hitting us. They told her if she didn't cooperate, they would hurt us. She yelled at them, and they took us away. We tried to fight back and escape, but they hit me hard enough that I felt dizzy. Then they brought us back and taken our clothes. Later, they gave us some shorts, but we didn't get shirts. We got really cold and shivered all night. When Mommy came back, she was wearing that little dress. She held us, and we all cried together. They did many bad things to her every day until yesterday. Then they left her alone. You have to help her." "I will, son. We're on a flight to see some of the best doctors in Texas, but first we need to let the pilot take off so we can head that way, okay?" He seemed much older than he did a week ago before this all started, and my heart felt heavy toward those responsible. He quickly took his seat, and as soon as I sat down, I wrapped Caitlin in my arms. She felt stiff and didn't respond, but she didn't push me away. Her lip was trembling and her right eye was twitching. Claude was right, she was close to breaking, physically, mentally, and emotionally. This was going to be a long flight, and the months ahead would be tough. Once we were in the air, I looked at Grace and Doss, who were turned in their seats watching me and their mom. They looked serious, but they stayed strong. I smiled at them to offer some comfort that things would turn out okay, and I wondered if we had won this battle but lost the larger struggle. The extent of the damages was still unknown. Ava was sitting behind me. She leaned forward and quietly said, "I think she has internal injuries, but a lot of her pain comes from bruises from what they did to her before she learned to obey them. She would still be fighting, or worse, if they hadn't hurt Logan and Grace to force her to listen. I'm a doctor who has taken an oath to help, but I feel no guilt about what happened to them. There was not one good person in that group. They put others in terrible situations, and I'm sure that Morales and the one you call Popovich are facing their own consequences right now." Caitlin looked very pale and was breathing heavily, but her head rested on my chest with her eyes closed. Maybe we should have gone to a closer hospital, but I wanted the best care for her and the children, and the world-class facilities in San Antonio were only an hour away. Caitlin's physical injuries could be serious and needed attention right away, but the emotional scars on all of them could be even harder to heal. We might be heading to Houston next, but I know the care available in San Antonio, and I know the doctor I want to lead their treatment. He promised to be waiting for us at the Methodist ER in Bourne. He would check on them and then decide the next steps. To my left, I could see IH-10 and the towns of Ingram and Kerrville along the river. We had already passed over Junction. Comfort was next, and then we would land in Bourne, just outside San Antonio, one of the largest cities in the U.S. We were only a few minutes away, so I called Dr. Ramos. He assured me they were ready and mentioned that word had spread about my family's rescue and their journey to San Antonio. The news reporters were everywhere at the medical center, so he wanted to keep anyone away unless it was really needed. He didn't say it, but it meant that federal agents would be waiting there. I was relieved we had taken a different route to Bourne, as he suggested. Our story was that we were recovering from mercenaries looking for a reward of $6 million. This was meant to satisfy an eager audience, not hold up to careful checking. Sure, we left behind some misleading clues online, but only our friends at La Kiva could confirm where we had been for the last 4 days. It was unlikely our story and their testimony would trick a team of FBI agents, let alone convince the U.S. and Mexican governments that I was innocent. They hadn't helped us, but would now be quick to claim I had something to do with crimes in Mexico during the rescue. I needed to contact my friends in Washington, D.C., but I had to wait until Caitlin and the others were taken for exams. I needed their support to soften the investigations, or I might have to tell the truth and blame the two governments for not stepping in to help my ex-wife and kids. That might sound good to the media and their followers, but it could also land me in Mexico facing trial. If they were really upset about our trip, how would they react when important officials and criminals started facing troubles? The chaos had been unleashed by those who were now the targets, but because of their power, they would try to protect their own. What would happen if those responsible began facing serious issues? Would those stepping in hide, or would they stand up? I was trying to protect myself and my loved ones from danger. They were fighting to keep their privileges and stolen wealth. I felt my reasons were stronger, but I knew they would fight back when threatened. Were they as ruthless as I was prepared to be? They had shown it so far, but what would happen when the attention turned to them? The plane landed smoothly, and we taxied to the company hangar, which had been reinforced for safety. Esteban, Juan, Charlie, and 5 men I didn't recognize were positioned around the area for protection. A van, 2 SUVs, and a large, rugged Hummer were parked in front of the hangar, facing the open door. Everyone except Charlie was armed, and they were ready at every entrance. As soon as she got off the plane, Caitlin was carefully placed on a stretcher by Charlie, who was a trained nurse and a former Navy medic. He leaned over her, introduced himself, and spoke to her gently as she was taken to the van and the stretcher was secured inside. Charlie kept asking her questions softly while the side door closed. She was answering him and seemed to be settling down with his help. Juan guided Ava, Esmeralda, and Octavio to the Suburban, while Logan, Grace, and I were directed to the Humvee. I helped them into the second seat and then climbed in myself. Our driver was Raul, and Esteban was in the passenger seat. Raul took us to the back position, behind the Suburban, the van, and the lead SUV, which was a tough-looking old Ford Excursion. I noticed someone lying low behind us, checking the road through small openings. He had several rifles and lots of ammunition around him. It was clear that being quiet was not our goal. We looked like the heavily armed convoy we were. Dr. Mario Ramos, a proud son of San Antonio with degrees from Johns Hopkins, was waiting at the ER entrance. He and Charlie were talking as they brought Caitlin inside. Another doctor asked, "Which one of you is Rob McGregor?" I raised my hand, and he immediately asked, "Are the children and the other woman the released hostages?" I nodded, and he invited them to come in with him. My kids looked at me with wide eyes. I encouraged them with a few kind words and a smile. Then Eva stepped in, leading all 4 kids inside while quietly explaining what would happen next. Grace looked back at me just before the doors closed, but she seemed calm enough. Other members of Esteban's team had already taken up good spots around and on top of the building. He organized the rest of the team and asked me to return to the waiting Hummer to continue our talk. After assuring me that our security was strong, he wanted to discuss our recent trip into Mexico and share details about our known and suspected enemies. Esteban was very smart and had a lot of information. After an hour, he made several connections we hadn't considered yet. I agreed to discuss those connections further with Claude and Clay, and I told him I was going to check on the patients. Just then, Mario was coming toward the entrance looking for me. "Your kids and Ava's have been checked and had blood samples taken. We're doing CT scans on them next. Caitlin is getting an MRI to confirm what Dr. Valdez and I suspect. We will know soon enough, but if we're right, she will be moved to the surgical wing. Dr. Valdez has a good relationship with the 4 children, so she and Dr. Alanis are in charge of their testing and care while I focus on your wife." I felt it would seem a bit rude to correct him by saying ex-wife, so I didn't. Instead, I promised myself to stop correcting people about that issue and to work on fixing it soon. Nothing like losing someone to make you see how important they are to you. I did ask him about Dr. Valdez. He looked surprised and said, "Dr. Eva Valdez, the one you brought here. You know she trained at Stanford, right?" "Yes, but I didn't know her last name, so she has your respect, even if she didn't go to Johns Hopkins," I joked. He smiled and replied, "Stanford was almost my first choice." Dr. Ramos took me inside the building. Through several doors he opened with his card, until we reached radiology and nuclear medicine. Let's see what they found. What they found wouldn't be fully explained for about a day, but the radiologist had asked for an abdominal CT scan after the MRI. Those results were clear to the doctors, but confusing to me. I did understand when Mario called the surgical center. "Okay, Rob. Dr. Valdez's diagnosis was right. Mrs. McGregor has a bruised spleen that is leaking blood, but doesn't seem to be broken. She also has a hurt kidney and 3 broken ribs. We need to treat the spleen quickly to avoid any complications. The kidney should heal on its own, but we'll need to monitor it closely. Fortunately, the ribs didn't affect her lungs, so recovery will just involve managing her pain for now. I'm moving her to the surgical wing on the north side, where she will stay for several days after the surgery. Esteban told me everything is secure, so there shouldn't be any issues." He started to turn, but then focused on me instead. "My friend, I know you want to know more, and I'll share everything we find after her surgery. For now, yes, she has been hurt physically and emotionally, but her physical injuries are not as severe as I feared or as you might worry. If she hadn't been hurt so badly on her back, thighs, and other areas, her discomfort would be much less. There is some expected damage, but we will decide whether to take action after a closer look. She did catch a strain of gonorrhea that's common in Mexico, but it can be treated easily. We'll need to wait for 1845 days for the HIV test results, and another 3 months for the final results, but everything else has come back negative. Not the best situation, but definitely not the worst. Now I need to get ready to help with her surgery. Oh, and Dr. Valdez asked to let you know she will care for the children, so you can focus on what's needed while everyone else is busy. A medtech guided me out and gave me directions to the ER parking area. Esteban was waiting in the room. He took me out to the Hummer, turned on the equipment, and filled me in. Things were moving quickly, so I needed to call Tom Yonkers right away. Esteban got everything ready, and I dialed the number I had. He picked up on the 3rd ring. "Give me a moment. I need to find a safe spot." A few minutes later, he said, "Wow, Rob, You sure know how to stir up trouble, don't you? Are you and your family okay? Caitlin is in surgery and will need a lot of support later, but we're hopeful. The kids have some bumps and bruises, but they seem all right for now. Their feelings, though, might need more attention. We rescued another woman and her 2 children. She's a doctor, and the medical team says she's doing well. She and her kids have dual citizenship because she's part of the Nahuatl tribe, and her husband was American. She lost everything back in Mexico, so she'll be staying in the U.S. Clay says they are all dealing with stress and trauma, and Dr. Galvez agrees. Mario Ramos is looking after them. I'm sure you remember him from before. Now I have a lot of real enemies who still want to hurt me. How many of the loud, troublemaking kind do I have back east and down south? I probably need to see your real enemy list to spot the overlaps, but there are a few, not too many. Some people back east are embarrassed they didn't do more while you were rescuing the hostages, and most are still ashamed about the mess with the North Koreans. Down south, they say they had everything under control and were going to swoop in to save the day before you sent in armed men and caused trouble. While they don't think you were actually part of the raid, they believe you funded it. General Lee and I think differently. Who is right? Come on, General Yonkers, do you really believe a guy my age in my shape could trek 100 miles across the dry Altiplano at night, let alone face off against cartel soldiers? I'm just a regular guy from Texas. Yes, we believe that, he laughed. And you'll have to tell us the whole story when we meet again. And congratulations on getting everyone back safely. Now, how can we help you? That was a longer and less friendly conversation. Esteban, what's the plan while Caitlin is in the hospital and the kids are not? It's hard to keep 2 places safe, so where are we staying? Claude said you have a place. I don't, he chuckled. You do. Remember that small ranch you bought 2 years ago by Sister Creek and the Guadalupe River? It has a stone house built by German settlers in the mid-1800s. I can't imagine how those guys managed to move and stack those heavy 2-foot blocks, but it left me as amazed as anyone. We made the house, storm cellar, and barn pretty sturdy. We also set up some advanced equipment around the place just in case. Thanks for helping pay for that. We've used it 3 times, and now it's yours too. It's not the mountain lair, but it's not bad. How are things back east? Claude says he likes it when plans come together, so we should start checking the news. I was feeling frustrated. Back east, in the swamps, there's a lot of boasting and threats happening, but my source says most of it is just talk. They were too busy arguing while we took real action, and now they're embarrassed that someone else saved the hostages. Too bad for them. The government and the Justice Department need to wake up and deal with the boldness of criminals on our border and in our country instead of just talking while letting politicians collect money from their supporters. The war on drugs has been ongoing since Reagan, and the only thing that's changed is that the other side has more money, more weapons, and more power than many governments south of us. When faced with the problem of kidnapping, Washington said, "We'll need to go through formal channels." Oh yes, let the people responsible for the rise of the cartels decide what we do to protect Americans taken by them. That sounds like a great plan. Just as effective as the war on drugs. I sighed. Anyway, if everything is working out, they will have more to complain about tomorrow if they are still around. Caitlin's surgery was a success. They were giving her strong antibiotics to fight the infection that had started from a small injury. Mario made it clear that she needed to rest, and for the next 48 hours, her job would be to sleep. She would need help using the restroom, but her injuries needed quiet time to heal. Everyone was ensuring she could get the rest she required with medication, so I was told to wait until I got a call that we could visit her. Eva, Esme, and Tavo would be staying with us, along with 6 team members. Esteban was at the hospital with the other 5, so Charlie would lead our group. The old house showcased beautiful German design, and the view was one of the prettiest I had ever seen in Texas. The cypress trees along the creek and river seemed like they belonged in Oregon, and the clear, slow-moving waters of the Guadalupe looked clean and inviting. There was even a swing hanging from a tree over a deep pool of water. Caitlin will enjoy this place, I thought at first, but the loud laughter from the 4 kids drowned out my thoughts. They had found what they believed to be the best water park ever. They wanted to swim right away, even though it was almost dark. Tomorrow, I said, which brought a chorus of groans. But they quieted down when Charlie mentioned we would have dinner at the barbecue restaurant just up the road towards Sisterdale. Esme and Tavo were curious about barbecue, so Grace and Logan eagerly shared too much information about the tasty meats and sides. The fact that this barbecue spot, out in the middle of nowhere, had a parking lot full of cars was proof that it was good, and they were right, it was delicious. We all felt full and tired. No one stayed awake long after their baths, including me. What an amazing day we had. 24 hours ago, I was heading to the ridge near the gang's fortress. Eva and her family were resting and getting ready for their plans, while Caitlin, Grace, and Logan felt hopeless in a tough spot. With full stomachs and night prayers done, we gave in to our tiredness, safe in this old blockhouse. The coffee must have been made by one of the former Navy folks because it was very strong. I usually like my coffee black with sweetener, but I added creamer this time and joined the three men at the table on the porch. They laughed at my cup, but I was happy knowing I wouldn't upset my stomach as quickly. Next was Ava. She was barefoot and wore the same simple dress as before, but she looked calm, peaceful, and lovely, even though her dress was a bit worn and wrinkled. We greeted her through the screen door, and I warned her about the coffee, which she eyed carefully. She poured her mug, 2/3 full, sipped it, added 2 packets of sweetener, filled it with creamer, took another sip, and smiled. She opened the screen door and joined us on the porch, pausing when she noticed how we were looking at her. Her big brown eyes shone with intelligence, curiosity, and a love for life. Her straight, shiny black hair was parted down the middle and tucked behind her ears. It hadn't been cut in a long time, so it fell past her back and the ends were a bit uneven. She was slender and graceful, with a long neck, elegant shoulders, arms, and hands. The dress hung loosely to her knees, but the way it moved revealed she was fit, and her well-shaped ankles and legs hinted at the strength she had. Don't blame me. Getting in and out of helicopters while wearing a dress is not easy, and I couldn't look away quickly enough, even if I wanted to. She stood by the door, enjoying her coffee and letting us take her in before giving us a big smile. Speaking of which, we need to go shopping today. I plan to get rid of this dress and the kids' clothes to forget those memories. Turning to me, she asked, "Have you talked to Dr. Ramos this morning?" I shook my head. "Not yet." "Good. I want to listen in," she said as she took a seat at the table. We enjoyed our coffees and talked about the beautiful hill country and safe places to shop. Armando mentioned several shops in Bourne, so we decided to check those out first. Eva asked about internet access, and we found out we had fiber internet out here thanks to the local telephone coop. How exciting! It's been 3 years since I've had internet, and I can't wait to check on my bank accounts and investments. I also need new credit and debit cards. Can I have them sent here? They gave her the number of a post office box in Comfort, and Armando offered to help her get set up on a computer. She accepted with another bright smile, but held up her mug and said, "After I finish this delicious coffee and enjoy some more of this lovely morning with good conversation. You can't imagine how nice this is after the tough times of the past 3 years." I poured my second cup of coffee and went to check on the children. They were in the game room with iPads full of kids' shows, chatting happily. There were 2 gaming stations nearby, but they didn't seem to be interested in those, which was a relief since the games on them probably weren't great for kids. The boys were excited when I told them we were going shopping for new clothes soon. Their current clothes were old and uncomfortable, and they liked Ava's idea of getting rid of them after we bought new ones. I got dressed and headed back to the kitchen, where Benito and Armando were making huevos rancheros, ham, and flour tortillas. The homemade salsa and tortillas made the meal really tasty. I'd never had that kind of ham before, but I definitely wanted more. Eva was thrilled to see her account balances, but concerned about how long it would take to receive her new cards. I handed her a business card I don't use often and told her not to worry. We could settle everything later. She smiled, gave me a quick kiss on the cheek, and said she would pay me back. I smiled and gently shook my head. She grinned and insisted, "Oh, yes, I will." We left it at that, and everyone started getting the vehicles ready. The first kids' store had everything they wanted, so they chose 5 outfits and wore one right away. We packed up their old clothes in a bag for a special ceremony later. Ava, however, was thrilled with all 3 shops that Armando recommended. She looked through every item in each store, even the small decorations. After our first stop, Benito, Jim, and DJ took the kids to the park to play and have some fun while Armando and I stayed back to help Ava. What do you think of this? Is it too much? How about this one? Should I get these shorts too with this top? She asked excitedly. Even though she was a skilled doctor, she was still just a woman, and a beautiful one at that. She looked fantastic in everything she tried on, and we eagerly agreed with her. I bet the kids will be hungry soon. Do you think you'll be done shortly? I asked. She gave me an apologetic look. I'm sorry. I've been wanting to shop for so long. Thank you for being so patient. I have what I need for now, and if I don't buy too much today, I can treat myself to another shopping trip, she said happily. After going through so much in the past few years, she could easily switch back to feeling like a carefree teen. Just as we were heading to meet the kids at Creekside Grill, my phone rang, and the name Mario Ramos, Maryland, appeared. Sorry I took a while to call, he said. I just got your message, but I was in surgery all morning with a patient from a car accident, and I wanted to review her test results first. To keep it simple, she is getting better. Dr. Ramos, this is Dr. Galvez. I'd like to hear the details, I replied. Sure thing, doctor, he said, launching into technical language. I focused on our route and asked Armando about the communication center I was supposed to use. He mentioned it was in the basement and that we were set to contact headquarters at 5:15 p.m. Ava asked for clarification and then told him we'd check back later. I jumped in asking, when can she have visitors? He said we should call after morning rounds tomorrow. The nurses would be able to inform us about visitor rules, but it might be a bit early. The food was nice, but a bit expensive and not very kid-friendly as I had hoped. Luckily, the kids found a few dishes they liked, so everything turned out fine, and the adults enjoyed their meals as well. On our way back to the house, we stopped at H-E-B to grab some groceries, snacks, and drinks for the kids. We also picked up some treats from the bakery, and I visited the butcher to get some fine steaks. When we arrived home, Ava and 4 of the men took the kids to go swimming, while I headed into the communication center. After talking to the former Secretary of State, I called Raimundo to thank him for his help and to make sure he knew our plans. He mentioned that Claude had filled him in yesterday and that he was happy with his new teammates. They were doing well in finding others to join their fight against the Sinaloans. Roads and villages were getting stronger, and the new tools were being used properly with help from their advisors. This made me smile. How great would it be if our unexpected journey really helped bring freedom to the native people of Chihuahua and Sonora? It was surprising since many thought they wouldn't help at all. Yet here they were starting a new group. After that, it was all business as I tried to catch up on what I had missed during the past week. Only one deal had gone bad, but we managed to bring it back to life and get it back on track. Overall, I was happy with how well things had gone while I was away, but the events of the last week made it clear I needed someone to help keep things running in my absence. I contacted a recruiter I had worked with before, and we put together a job description. She promised to keep looking, but said she wouldn't advertise it unless I asked her to. With that settled, I checked in with my partners in the Dakotas, the Delaware Basin, and the Eagle Ford about projects in those oil and gas areas. All were happy with profits and the ongoing development of our resources. My wealth was growing quickly as investments were returning more money. That was great to see, especially considering the costs of our adventures, both past and future. Things were not as easy in Ukraine, the Baltics, or Kazakhstan, but that was expected, with lots of unrest involving Russia and politicians looking for money in Kazakhstan. My work there was aimed at supporting the local players in return for non-participating benefits, so problems didn't hurt my finances, but successes would. Each phone call I made started with questions about Caitlin and our kids, followed by congratulations on their safe return. Then we moved on to business. My answers about the rescue were vague enough that they let it go quickly. 5:15 arrived fast. Esteban came back for the meeting and joined me. After the usual update on Caitlin and the kids, the Edwards brothers informed us about our response. After that chat, Esteban and I decided to stay up to watch the late news. They had released the dogs, but we were causing chaos. My updates from Raimundo and the former secretary were also well received, although investigations in Washington, D.C. and the Distrito Federal had not stopped. We were waiting for the FBI and the Mexican agency, the Policia Federal Ministerial, to visit us soon for interviews. We went over our answers and the information on the dark web that we planned to show them. Once again, we had done our best, but the results were still unsure. I hoped we hadn't used all our luck out there in the desert. Armando had made a fire in the pit just as I asked, and the steaks were seasoned when we returned. I was in charge of grilling that night, making prime ribeye steaks, grilled corn, grilled squash, and a fresh green salad. When the coals were ready, I started cooking. Kids sometimes don't really understand or appreciate steak, and they often don't know how they want it cooked. I never burn prime steaks or any other meat, so when they said, "Well done," I made it medium instead. They were so busy chatting and munching on corn that I doubt they even noticed their steaks had a bit of pink in the middle. Eva loved her meat medium rare, and that was true for all the men except Charlie. He told me to just grill it and bring it to him. I cooked it a bit longer than that, making sure it was warm, but it still was a little too rare for my taste, and I usually like it rare. Everyone enjoyed the grilled vegetables, and Armando's peach cobbler for dessert was a big hit. The tasty meal led to a cheerful conversation about many things, avoiding any talk about captivity, rescue, Caitlin's situation, or any hidden worries in the children's minds. Eva seemed more relaxed than I had seen her before, and the children looked genuinely happy. Were they really that strong, or was something else troubling them beneath the surface? Maybe I was the only one still in pain. My pride told me I had failed to protect Caitlin and our kids, ignoring any other opinions. My conscience kept asking if having them with me was too risky, considering the ongoing threats against us. My frustration for what happened oddly extended to Clay and Claude, even though I knew they had done enough to keep us safe. Miroslav's betrayal changed everything, and without their help, any chance of rescue would have been lost. Interestingly, they felt the same way they thought they had failed, and something terrible had happened. When things happen that I cannot control, my annoyance spreads everywhere. I know this is a problem I need to work on, but it will take time for me to relax. Without saying anything, I quietly slipped away from the dining area, as if I was headed to the restroom, but walked down to the river instead. The cypress trees cast shadows in the late afternoon. The clear water swirled gently, and I noticed fish moving from dark spots into sunlight. The wind whispered in the trees, and the scent of the river filled the air, calming my troubled thoughts. A little. I heard her voice before she even spoke. "She'll be okay. The kids will be okay. We'll all be okay. Even you, Rob." I took a deep breath and stayed quiet. "You're feeling guilty. I understand that. You always want to protect and take care of others. Deep down, you know this wasn't your fault or Claude's fault or anyone's fault except for those who hurt your family and mine. My husband would have felt the same way if he were here. I know you have a plan for how to handle this situation, and I get it, I really do. Just look at how I went after Morales and his team. But seeking revenge won't really help you, just like my actions didn't erase the pain I went through. Don't lose yourself while trying to find justice, Rob. You are a good person who has been wronged. Don't let them change who you are." "Thanks, Ava. I'll think about what you said. Do you want to join me for a bit? There's a nice place to sit over there." She agreed, and as we sat down, I felt a strong awareness of her presence. "Missing someone?" she asked after I glanced at her legs. I smiled and nodded. "It's not that you aren't wonderful, but she and I have a complicated past. We were starting to move forward after her betrayal when this happened. She's struggling with so much guilt and pain, and I worry. She may not heal from this. The harm done to her body is nothing compared to what she's dealing with in her mind, and I fear she won't be able to recover. She'll meet with a psychiatrist, Aaliyah Thompson, at 9 tomorrow, Eva said. I'll see Dr. Thompson at noon, and the kids have a group session at 2, followed by individual sessions. From these meetings, we'll develop our plans, and we all need to give these plans time to work. You have an hour starting at 10:30 just for you. I know what you're thinking. You need this. Even if you don't feel like it, she needs to hear from you. What you share will help with everyone's treatment. If you trust me, if you trust Dr. Ramos, please do this. Share openly and honestly. If you want things to improve for everyone, you have to help her help us. I will. Breaking news. My phone announced around 9. I turned on the TV and flipped to CNN, then checked other channels. The banner flashed just as the anchor started to report on the day's top stories. "We have breaking news!" he shouted urgently as a video of a car fire appeared on the screen. Billionaire Serge Petrov and 5 of his close friends died tonight when their limousine exploded on a quiet street in New York City. The 6 men had just left a bar Petrov owned in Manhattan, and it is believed they all died in the blast and fire. In related news, another building owned by Petrov was raided at the same time. At least 3 men were found dead inside, and 32 women who said they had been held there were rescued. 2 of these women are speaking to our reporter now. "Miss Gaddis, could you share what you just told me with our viewers?" asked the reporter, holding a microphone in front of a young blonde woman who looked about 19 or 20. "I'm Marie Gaddis. I was taken from my home in Tennessee over 2 years ago by members of the gang led by Serge Petrov," she said quickly. "I'm risking a lot by saying this, but there are about 30 of us still being held in that old hotel, where we were forced to do things for business partners and corrupt officials, including some in the police. During my 2 years there, I saw many girls come and go, either taken away or harmed. It's time for someone in power to step up and stop this." "Miss Gaddis, as we understand it, the police don't yet know who rescued you, and they are looking for those responsible as suspects in the harm caused to you and the others. Is that right?" "Yes, that's right," shouted the young brunette next to her. "They also hurt us whenever they wanted and helped others do terrible things to us." She spat on the ground and yelled, "I denounce them, and I denounce those who let this happen. Yes, we know who you are, and we are going to tell everyone about what you've done. Here are lists that 3 of us made. Juanita is gone now, but her list remains. Keep them safe. The police and officials will try to take them from you. Believe me, too many powerful people are involved." The CNN reporter was seen taking the lists and handing them to someone who quickly moved toward the news van behind them. "We will safeguard these lists, Miss Hansen. Do others have lists like these?" "Yes, we all agreed to make lists. Send someone to collect them before they disappear." The reporter called over a man and a woman and gave them instructions. They hurried away, and he started telling the crowd what had happened and the claims being made. I changed channels and saw a young girl saying she had a list to support her claims. She gave it to the Fox reporter, and 2 other women stepped up to hand their lists to the assistant, who took them and rushed toward the Fox van. I switched to another channel, but a notification on my phone caught my attention. It was Raimundo saying, "Telemundo en la mañana." I stayed up for a few more hours watching all the chaos before I fell asleep in the recliner. The news outlets were keeping the lists secret. They wouldn't share any names until their lawyers gave approval, if they ever did. The women who were being helped understood that they couldn't keep these lists for long without risk. Armando woke me up early, beaming with a big smile on his round face. He turned on the TV, tuning into Telemundo, and plopped down on the biggest sofa. It was in Spanish, but here's what I gathered in English. An assistant attorney general and his family had been kidnapped overnight, and there was a national search for them without any leads. The assistant attorney general was known to be tough on crime, but the kidnappers left evidence that he was linked to several criminal groups and had committed various crimes. One of the alleged crimes was his part in the kidnapping of an American woman and her children, who had just been freed from captivity. It was also claimed that he was involved in serious offenses against many women, including the American woman. It seemed likely that he and his family were taken as revenge. I took the remote and flipped to the morning shows where discussions about First Amendment rights were taking place. They talked about how these rights could stop New York City and state officials from seizing the well-known lists. The network stated that the names had not been revealed yet because they were working to confirm the claims made by the women who were under protection. The ACLU had stepped in overnight, offering help to each woman and filing legal requests for those who accepted. Emergency hearings were planned throughout the day, and family members had flown in from all over the country after seeing their loved ones on TV or mentioned among those held. Some had lawyers with them, and many took advantage of the ACLU's help. Some of the teenagers spoke limited English and needed interpreters to help them communicate. Things had gotten really chaotic, But the situation escalated even more about an hour later when I got a message from a friend in Washington. "I hope you're ready, my friend, because you really stirred things up this time. The Great Chicago Fire looks small compared to this crisis." "I have no idea what you're talking about, my friend," I replied. I was flipping through channels to get an idea of what was happening, but I had been staying at one of my ranches, waiting for updates on Caitlin's situation. I wanted to make it clear that I wasn't involved. "That's good to hear, but I'm afraid the authorities in the U.S. and Mexico think you might have a part in the deaths of Petrov and his close aides, as well as the disappearance of Assistant Attorney General de los Santos and his family in Mexico City. They believe you may have been connected to the capture and mistreatment of your wife and children and suspect you might want revenge. That caused the chaos, but the real issue was the freeing of the women who had lists naming their abusers. It seems there are important names on that list, and they are panicking. I don't know how much protection you have, but it likely isn't enough," I scoffed. "They started all this, not me. I'm just responding to their actions. If my family is threatened, theirs will be too. That's a promise. If they don't want trouble, they need to back off. Plus, harming me won't stop the networks and media from revealing the names. They should focus on intimidating them instead of me. I don't have any lists." The following discussion in the communications center was brief and direct. All available personnel from Ultimate Solutions across the country were sent to Bourne, Texas, and 4 top lawyers were joining them. An hour later, a message appeared on a hidden website offering rewards for those involved in the kidnapping and mistreatment of the freed women in New York City. It was a placeholder telling visitors to check back often. The names would be posted once they were confirmed. I heard there was a lot of activity on that site, including the FBI, which had gotten a link apparently from a site based in Russia. People in New York, D.C., and other places were realizing they aren't safe from consequences. If they go after us, we will respond, no holding back. In the meantime, we have a tech company we trust keeping an eye on the dark web for any updates about us, as well as other channels for information. I, along with my family, Ava, and 5 of our security team, made our way to the hospital. Esteban was updated, so we were hurried inside while the 5 men took their positions. I was told there were no news vans or officials seen so far. The excitement over the rescue had faded a bit after the first news cycles, but surged again after the deaths in NYC and the kidnapping in Mexico were connected. The media wouldn't let this go, and they had sources. Our moment of facing the impact was likely approaching. It was a time when I was especially thankful for our lawyers. The trip to the hospital was smooth. Caitlin was with her doctor when we arrived, but she had gotten better, so I got to spend half an hour with her before my own appointment. When we talked, she seemed dazed and quiet, but allowed me to kiss her forehead and hold her hand. When I asked what she thought of Dr. Aaliyah Thompson, she shrugged her shoulders and said, "She's okay." It wasn't a glowing review, but I was happy it wasn't a frown. Knowing that Grace and Doss would visit her after I left lifted her spirits a little, and the mention of Eva brought a faint smile. Still, I didn't see the lively woman I met in the mountain compound. Eva brought all 4 kids in a bit early at 10:25, so I quickly said my goodbyes, kissed her head again, and left her with her excited children. In my view, Dr. Thompson was much more than just okay. She had a curious mind and a gentle way of helping people share their thoughts. She often repeated back what she thought she understood, which helped clear up any confusion, and encouraged me to share more. I realized I had things to tell her that could help with my family, and I also saw I might have some personal issues about my relationship with Caitlin, and maybe some anger to deal with as well. Feeling encouraged after my time with her, I went to check on Esteban. He was in a big conference room near the nurses' station, surrounded by several fit men, some of whom worked for Ultimate Solutions. They had just arrived. Esteban and the others I knew welcomed me warmly, and those I didn't know were introduced politely. It felt like being in a room full of athletes. They were focused and alert. Esteban's plan sounded great. He broke up the group and they paired off. I moved to the front of the room with Esteban, and 4 men in sharp suits came in behind me. I knew them well as clients. They had a solid plan that covered legal, public relations, and political angles. My chances of staying safe and avoiding jail were still uncertain, but that would depend on decisions made by people outside this room. The The lawyers had crafted a plan based on what we had explained, offering those who enforced the laws a way to maintain their reputations and protect themselves. It would be tempting to go with it if they could handle the pressure from others affected by our situation. The attorneys general of the U.S. and Mexico would make the final decisions, and I would learn where things stood from the tone of the interviews with the FBI and PFM. Ava was with Dr. Thompson now, and then she would meet with Dr. Ramos was with the kids, while our security staff entertained them. They had a special room with a TV and books where they could wait until it was time to see the doctor. I got a call from the FBI, which I passed on to the lead lawyer in our group. He arranged to meet in Bourne at a law office he knew well. My inquisitors might not like it, but everything would be officially recorded. We wanted to avoid any misunderstandings or misinterpretations. Among the 4 people there, one representing PFM was friendly and observant but kept quiet. I thought he might have a title that included Director. He introduced himself as Rodolfo Jimenez de Garcia and gave me a firm handshake. One FBI agent was polite, another was hostile, and the third was reserved. He might have had a special or director title too, as the others glanced at him without directly addressing him. Todd kept trying to dominate the discussion, but Carl managed to keep things calm, with help from my lead lawyer, John. John clearly showed his frustration with Todd's antics by reminding everyone that we were there to help with the case. If I was a suspect, we would change our approach, he assured them. The calm attitudes of Special Directors Dan and Juan were generally helpful, especially when they exchanged looks of disapproval at Todd's foolish behavior. Don, another lawyer, used his laptop to show a clip of my public plea for help and the reward for the safe return of my family, which had been shared worldwide. My friend Monroe brought up the same plea and reward that had appeared on the dark web, with almost the same words. Our final lawyer, Beto Ruiz, showed the transaction of $6 million to an offshore account, which had happened right after my family was safely back in Texas. Did they believe it? No, but it was persuasive. Could they prove I was involved in the rescue? Not unless one of our team or allies talked, and I seriously doubted that would happen. The topic of the kids was going to be tough. Do not lie is something we always teach children, but they were about to learn a more complex version of that lesson. We will do everything we can to protect them from being questioned, but even a small slip could lead to problems. Eva and I need to talk about this when we get back to the house by the river. From the police's point of view, it might seem strange that an unknown group helped my family and dealt with the bad people who took them, but strange things can happen for a lot of money on the global stage. More importantly, I had offered a reward for the safe return of my family, and this news was shared all over the world, backed by both governments. We created a cover story for the unfortunate events that unfolded, which the officials accepted. We said we offered a reward. My family came back along with 3 other hostages. It was sad that some criminals lost their lives during the rescue. But was this something Mexico accepted, since they were its citizens? Was I seen as a vigilante who needed to be stopped? Or just a worried father who asked for help after 2 governments could not? They wanted answers, but did those in charge really want the truth? Or did they want to avoid the trouble of prosecuting a father for hiring help to save his family after both countries failed? Todd wanted the truth. Others might be looking for a way to look good, but we offered a believable cover. Our story seemed to work for them, and signs showed we were nearing the end of the meeting. But Todd decided to intimidate me one more time. You know we can investigate all this, and when it points back to you, which I'm sure it will, I'm going to send you to prison for life. Is this guy really trying to scare me? I frowned while John shook his head. I chose to ignore him. So, let me get this straight, Agent Todd. You're going to show that I ordered what? A hit on a wannabe group that sold drugs to kids, harmed innocent people, and kidnapped others for money, all to save my own family? And let's not forget that the rescuers also saved another woman and her 2 kids without charge. She is a doctor trained at Stanford University and a member of the Nahuatl tribe. You think you'll be the big hero, standing in front of cameras when you explain your case against me? As charming as you are, Agent Todd, I doubt the cameras and reporters will be very interested in your story, let alone the public. I've shared what happened, and you've seen the proof. I will do the same in front of the cameras. I will show real tears about how the two governments failed to help find my dear family. Then we can have a trial based on the facts of the case. I can see from your attitude that you don't understand what it's like to be a father. But the jury will be made up of parents who know they would do the same if they had the money. Just like these other gentlemen here, I said, gesturing around the room. I turned my focus back to the others. Do what you want. We have shared our facts with you, and I will be polite to law enforcement in the many press conferences coming up unless Agent Wisner causes problems. If he does, look out. It's Agent Wisner, not Weasel, shouted a red-faced Todd. You are who you are, Wisner. Now, gentlemen, my beautiful Caitlin is recovering from surgery, bruises, broken ribs, and injuries caused by the people who took her away. I need to see her, then check on how my children are doing after their therapy sessions. If you need anything else from me, talk to my lawyers. We will, Mr. McGregor. Please take care of your family, and our thoughts are with you, said the quiet agent. Todd looked angry, but the glares from the others quieted him down. Agent Jimenez waited until the FBI agents left, then said softly, Some in my government see this as an invasion by armed individuals that harms our country. Others want to praise those individuals, and some are upset about losing a possible source of income. If the Assistant Attorney General returns safely to his family, I believe many good things could come from that. Maybe his captors will find it in themselves to let him go. I think many would reflect on the problems that lead to actions like those of De Los Santos if he is charged and found guilty. I nodded and said we hoped that would happen too. We shook hands again, and he left. Let Claude know, I told Esteban, who nodded. Our lawyers were focused on their laptops and seemed to be ignoring us. John looked up and said, That went well, I think. We might need to be careful, but the others seem satisfied. I don't think the pressure from above is as strong as we feared. Or maybe it's divided by those worried about their names being revealed. My visit with Caitlin didn't go as well. She was mostly unresponsive and distant, as if she didn't want to talk with me. She was building walls between us, and it felt like she was drifting away. No matter how hard I tried to have a nice chat, no matter what we talked about, she seemed distant, even when we talked about the kids. I stayed until she said she was too tired to keep talking. Then I went to look for Dr. Ramos, but I found out he had gone home for the night. I gathered the others and we headed back to the old limestone house on Sister Creek, where 2 travel trailers were set up to connect to the water supply and waste system. It surprised me, but with more men around, I should have expected it. Someone had the idea to bring buckets of fried chicken with sides, so the first thing we did was eat dinner. It was only 6, but I hadn't eaten lunch and figured most people hadn't either. After dinner, Eva and I watched a video with the kids and put them to bed at 9. She said goodnight, but hesitated when I asked, Eva, as a friend and a doctor, do you think Caitlin is getting worse instead of better? She paused for a moment. Rob, how do you feel about Caitlin after all of this? Has your view of her changed after knowing what happened? I was shocked. Of course not, I said, feeling upset. What happened to her and to you was beyond your control. I won't speak for her, but for myself, my past has changed how I feel. I've had many more relationships in the last few years than ever before. I am getting treatment for a health issue, and it's not the first time. When Morales took me, I had been with 2 men. Now I've lost count. I don't feel like the same person I was before. I can't imagine how any decent man would want to be with someone like me. I was stunned. That's not true, Ava. You are an incredible person. You're beautiful, smart, caring, kind, and a wonderful mother. Any man would be so lucky to have you. You should talk to Caitlin about this. 2 guards took me to the hospital early the next morning. I waited anxiously for the doctors and staff to finish their work. When Mario came out of Caitlin's room, I immediately asked him some tough questions. I knew about her injuries and the treatment she was receiving for her health issue. Caitlin insisted that I shouldn't be told about some of her other problems. Her ability to be intimate wouldn't be affected after she healed, and she could still have children. He admitted that as she returned to normal life, she felt sad about being a victim of violence and mistreatment. This was why he quickly encouraged her to start therapy. He suggested that I talk more with Dr. Thompson about this when we met again at 10:30. I didn't get to see Caitlin because of testing and her therapy, and I also didn't have a chance to discuss anything with the doctor. Instead, she started asking me questions. She wanted to know how I felt when Caitlin left me for Robert, my feelings about her after our divorce, and my hesitance to build a future with her, even before everything that happened. Trying to understand the doctor's motives, I figured she wanted to know if Caitlin being with Robert was the issue. Skirting around her questions, I said, "What hurt me was the dishonesty, the betrayal, and the blaming me when it was her and Robert who caused our separation." And then she turned our kids against me for Robert. The fact that Robert was with her didn't matter as much as her complete betrayal of our life and dreams and the breaking of our family. The doctor took my outburst calmly and then asked the questions I expected. "How do you feel about other men being with her, treating her poorly?" I glared at her, my frustration obvious. If she had chosen to leave me for them, or if she had put herself in danger, I would have told her to go away and take the kids. "But Doc, she was taken. She was kidnapped, moved far away, and trapped in a place with no escape. She fought back even when they hurt her, and she has the scars and bruises to show for it. She only gave in when they started threatening the kids, and she did what she needed to do to protect them. What part of that relates at all to why I was so upset when she left me for someone else? She was not with anyone she was harmed. Honestly, if I were in her position, I would have done anything to protect Dawson Grace. This isn't about how they treated her. It's about surviving a situation that could have led to her death or their harm. She's not a fallen angel, she's a hero. I've never loved her more than I do right now. She's the bravest, strongest, most wonderful person I know. You need to have that talk with Caitlin." "When?" "Now would be a good time," she said with a smile. I walked straight to her room and closed the door. She seemed to pull away from me, as if she thought I might be mean or hurt her. But she allowed me to sit next to her and bravely looked into my eyes. I started talking, trying to comfort her. I repeated what I had told Eva and Dr. Thompson and offered her my support. I wanted her to believe my words and understand that I love and care for her. Instead, she was in tears. She felt anxious and confused, and she even blamed herself as if she had caused it all. I might never fully understand what she was feeling, but I saw a side of Caitlin that I hadn't seen before. Having gone through such terrible experiences made her feel broken inside. She cried that a good man like me should not be with someone like her, which made me think she and Eva might have talked about this. She knew I should take care of the kids to protect them, but she couldn't imagine living without them. She felt she could never fit in again with people, always worried they would judge her. How could she be a good mother and partner? She thought we would be ashamed to be with her. She was very upset. She had fought against her fears with anger, but now, in a safe place, she struggled to accept what had happened to her. She was Caitlin. She had been innocent when we met, with only married men in her past. But now she felt like she was something terrible because of what others had done to her. Finally, I gently covered her mouth to quiet her. "Calm down, Caitlin," I said softly. "You're looking at this the wrong way. Sweetheart, if it had been me who faced those monsters, would you turn away from me? If I had been hurt in an accident, would you blame me for that? If I got sick, would you walk away from me? Don't give me that look. You think I would stop loving you just because something awful happened to you? Do I seem so selfish? I see you as someone who fought to protect herself and our children. Now that I have you back, which is all I've wanted, you want me to leave you to deal with your pain alone? No, I won't do that. You are going to get help. Take your medicine, go to therapy, and heal. I'm here for you through everything, and when you feel better, we will renew our commitment to each other. I won't take no for an answer." She cried with despair, as if she couldn't see that happening. I wondered if I had helped her avoid a deep pit of sadness or pushed her into it. It was normal to feel anxious, but there was something more, something deeper than just feeling sad. It seemed she had decided we could never be together again. Why did she think that? There must be something I wasn't getting, but what? We had faced hard times before with Robert, with the North Koreans. Why was this different? Why had she lost hope in our relationship, the one she had tried so hard to rebuild? Or am I asking too much from someone who feels so fragile and upset? I'm stuck in a nightmare that won't end, even when I'm awake. The next morning, just before sunrise, Assistant Attorney General Rogelio de los Santos and his family were left outside a police station in San Cristobal de las Casas, Chiapas. They were all fine, but Gloria was very angry at her husband and refused to talk to him. The details of their situation varied, but everyone agreed they had been taken in hoods and held in a remote area since their abduction. Their captors spoke Spanish, but were unknown since they wore masks and camouflage outfits when in view. They were not unkind and provided enough food, water, bedding, and access to a restroom. The children received toys and games to keep them entertained. While they were disturbed by what was happening, they were not severely traumatized. The kids were taken to a different room with their games, while Señora de los Santos and Señor de los Santos were seated in front of a large TV to watch a video. Señor de los Santos appeared in this video, engaging in distressing activities that left women upset and pleading for help, some of whom seemed powerless. The most troubling parts included scenes of children being hurt in front of their mothers as a way to force the mothers to comply. There were pictures of the women involved and images showing them in very bad conditions, with men laughing at them. Another set of similar videos and pictures was found stuck to the door of the San Cristobal police station with a knife. Red circles were drawn around the faces of De Los Santos and another well-known official who also took part in the mistreatment of the women and girls. Señora de los Santos and their 3 children were taken home to Mexico City by agents. Señor de los Santos was taken by Assistant Director Rodolfo Jimenez de Garcia to a secure location in Mexico City, where he was officially arrested, charged, and questioned. After reviewing the photographs and videos on a USB drive, a warrant was issued for former Army General and current Deputy Defense Minister Emilio Zepeda. The warrant listed various serious offenses, including conspiracy to abduct, unlawful detention of citizens, drug trafficking, and conspiracy related to violent acts. Zepeda was arrested later that day and is being held at the same secure location as De Los Santos. Meanwhile, Congressman Smithers, a member of the Foreign Relations Committee, was arrested in Washington, D.C. after similar evidence was reported to the police. The charges against him mirrored those of Zepeda and De Los Santos, but also included misconduct and misuse of power. A list of men involved in mistreating women freed from a hotel owned by Serge Petrov was posted online, although it was not clear who provided the information. The names were not confirmed yet, but there was a notice stating that the list was being verified. As the news spread, worried conversations grew louder across the U.S., while private jets were prepared for departure to places where they wouldn't be sent back. In contrast, the concerns from across the river faded away until they were no longer heard, and the State Department seemed uninterested in the events that led to the release of 6 American citizens held illegally by a gang in Chihuahua. It seemed as if those events either never happened, or that everything was fine now. The Weasel, however, remained preoccupied with his own troubles just a couple of days later. He was involved in a scandal surrounding photographs and videos of him with young individuals, as well as recordings of him sharing sensitive information with a now-deceased associate of Serge Petrov. With Agent Wisner in jail, the FBI focused on rapidly changing events in Washington and New York, while the Mexican government worked to resolve its own issues. As a result, official interest in the release of the hostages faded. Media attention remained, but it shifted towards more personal stories rather than urgent news. Eventually, Rob and Eva decided to give an interview to Jenna Bush Hagar, which would be shown on the 3rd hour of the Today Show. This demonstrated how much those once high-profile events had declined in public interest, given the many other pressing issues being discussed in powerful circles. They met Texan Jenna and her team at a ranch on the outskirts of San Antonio, near Bandera. 3 of the 4 children were seen from a distance, focused on their books. Only Esme was allowed to speak briefly. She talked about the terrible situation they had been in and how badly they were treated by their captors. Rob put Eva in the center of attention while she sat nearby looking concerned. She wore loose jeans and a pullover, with her hair tucked behind her ears and a simple look. She instinctively knew to dress down for the interview. She shared the story of her husband's death, the capture of her and her children, and spoke bravely about the mistreatment they faced. Though she didn't give details, her words brought Jenna to tears. When the camera focused on Rob and his microphone turned on, he shared the fear and sadness he felt after learning about the kidnapping of his wife and children. He also mentioned the loss of a 2-man security team due to a gang member in their vehicle. He expressed his helplessness as he waited for news and then received the ransom request. Both the American and Mexican governments advised him against paying the ransom, saying it rarely led to the safe return of hostages. Instead, they suggested offering a reward for the safe return of his family, which he did right away. Then he waited, knowing the chances were not in his favor. Once the rescuers brought his family and Eva's family to the airfield in Terlingua, he paid the reward and felt it was the best decision he had ever made. Looking directly at the camera, he said, "I don't know who you are, but I want you to understand that my gratitude for bringing back all 6 of them goes far beyond the money. If there's ever anything I can do for you, please let me know. I owe you, and I promise to help in any way I can." Eva and Jenna agreed. Eva spoke of their rescuers' bravery, her surprise when she and her children were freed, and how they were quickly taken away by helicopter. Caitlin chose not to appear live or be interviewed, so viewers only caught a brief glimpse of her. She was seen lying in a hospital bed, looking weak and troubled. It was a touching segment that drew sympathy for the hostages and for the man in Texas waiting anxiously for their return. Third Hour received a big boost in viewership from its mostly female audience that day. Jenna gave Rob and Eva warm hugs and once more shared her concern for them. The interviews met their goals without attracting unwanted attention from authorities on either side of the border. 3 weeks later, Rob and the security team drove Eva and her 4 children to Fort Davis. Caitlin was flown to a retreat in Arizona to receive help for her feelings of sadness, worry, and fear, especially concerning Robert Roy McGregor. After going through all the pain and confusion, Dr. Thompson realized that Caitlin's distance from Rob was less about her own feelings of guilt and more about the memories linked to him. She connected Rob with hurt, embarrassment, danger, and many other negative feelings she had experienced throughout her life. From her struggles with Robert to pushing Rob away, to the painful experiences she faced along the way, Rob had continuously been part of the struggles and heartache she encountered. It was known that Rob had done nothing wrong and had even rescued her from terrible situations more than once. But in Caitlin's mind, Rob had become tied to those painful memories. Dr. Thompson believed that with time and the right support, Caitlin could heal completely. However, she stressed that Caitlin needed time and care away from Rob and the children to work on herself. So Caitlin agreed to stay at the retreat for an open-ended period. Meanwhile, Eva focused on moving forward and creating a new life for herself and her kids. She started taking online courses to renew her medical credentials in California and to earn new ones in Texas. Though she had enough money, she felt lonely without friends or family and knew there might still be dangers. When Rob offered her a place to stay with food and transportation, she accepted, promising to pay him back, which brought a smile and a wink from him. The surroundings of Fort Davis, the Davis Mountains, the Mountain Lair, Duke, and the uncles brought joy to all 4 children and even to Eva. Claude was still there, with a large security team dedicated to keeping them safe. Clay, the one man Caitlin still trusted, was in Arizona with another team, ensuring her safety in the retreat. Esme and Tavo enjoyed a sense of freedom and opportunities they had never experienced, even during their father's life or while living in their mother's hometown. They had never had a dog before, so Duke became a new friend for the kids to love. He wagged his tail happily. Grace, Doss, and their uncles eagerly planned many trips for Esme and Tavo. They rode in strong vehicles and had several men with them to ensure their safety. Ava, along with Rob, went with them most of the time. But the kids loved exploring the streams, meadows, and woods of the ranch with the men they now called Uncle more than their parents did. Duke made sure they were well looked after while their parents were busy. Eva focused on earning her credits and improving her skills in family practice. Before starting her own clinic in Fort Davis, she gained permission to work at Big Bend Regional Medical Center in Alpine, at Culberson in Van Horn, and, with the help of Dr. Wang, at Midland Memorial. The community was excited to have a doctor ready to set up a practice and helped her find and prepare an office. A supportive group that had been inactive for years revived itself and raised money for important medical equipment. She was ready to work in less than 2 months. Rob was busy and earning a lot of money. His new reputation made it easier to attract investors and clients. He also enjoyed spending time with the kids. Summer was almost over and the days were becoming shorter. The children were taken to the district office to enroll in school for the next year. Grace and Doss had no worries about going back. In fact, they were thrilled. Their school experiences were all about fun with their friends and teachers, as the incident had happened away from school. Esme and Tavo had 3 years to catch up on, and their efforts were guided by Uncle Doc, a retired professor from Sul Ross State University. They were very bright and were learning quickly. August came, and still no news about Caitlin. Even though Rob was covering the costs, he could only receive the information Caitlin agreed to share, which didn't give much detail. Dr. Galvez tried to help, but she couldn't provide any updates either, so they stayed unaware of how she was doing. Surprisingly, Doss and Grace had begun to accept that their mom's absence was important for her recovery, just like they accepted the need for weekly video calls with Dr. Thompson to discuss their own health. From what Rob, Eva, Claude, and their uncles observed, all 4 kids were improving well. There were moments, especially at night, but they were happening less often and were less intense as summer went on. Eva, Claude, and the uncles had a new worry: Rob. Although he seemed fine during work or when chatting with the kids, he had become distant and lost in thought. He preferred to be alone when not with the children, and his usual excitement for life was fading away. They made plans and finally persuaded him to spend a few weeks at the desert lair before school began. They hoped that a change of scenery and new people might lift his spirits. It helped. Evenings at La Kiva with friends, enjoying cold drinks and delicious meals from Renee and Berta, brought some joy back to his life. They heard him laugh and tease again for the first time in a while. Claude and Eva insisted on outings around the park, which turned out to be a big moment for him. It was very hot in the desert, but not so much at their camp in the Chisos Basin, where they stayed in tents at night. Nothing extraordinary happened, not even a bright moon as during a previous trip with Caitlin. Yet Rob seemed to be starting to come back to life. The extent of his struggle became clear on the 3rd night, as they sat around a picnic table having drinks while the kids slept. It was after midnight, and empty bottles filled a recycling bag when Rob grew silent. Eva and Claude exchanged glances, waiting as he looked up at the stars. "It was a dark night like this when we reached that ridge, Claude. I didn't know how things would turn out, but I felt both scared and hopeful, until I faced the shadows in the valley. At that moment, hope took over my fear, and I knew it would be all right." And it was. Not only did we save my family, but we also helped Ava's family. What a gift that was, and still is. I've come to care for you both and your kids in a special way, Ava, and I hope you stay close to me and mine. He smiled at their surprise. "Not in that way. I see what's blossoming between you two, and that makes me truly happy for you." "No, our bond is friendly, shaped by the challenges that Caitlin cannot get past. I don't know what will happen with Caitlin and me, or if there even is a future for us. It's likely there's more of a path for Caitlin and Clay than for Caitlin and Rob. That makes me sad, but I'm learning to accept it. I have the children, and I will never let them go again. They are my reason for living. I miss Caitlin and the love we shared. I remember our special times together, but there are many things I cannot change. I can't make her forget her pain or love me more than she is afraid. So I will keep going. I will live my life for the children. I will make sure they are well cared for and have everything they need. I will spend time with my friends and enjoy my work. I will explore new places and do fun things. I will read and learn more and take care of my health. These activities will fill my days and nights and help me not think too much about what might have been. Yet, I still hope she finds her way back." Some people want to blame her for everything. They say if I had done the right thing and stopped working when Robert Sr. retired, Junior could never have turned her against me with lies. If I hadn't gone away after we separated, she wouldn't have spent more than 3 years searching for me after her divorce from Junior. If that had happened, Robert wouldn't have tried to harm us, and we wouldn't have faced the anger of dangerous groups or powerful people in our country. In some ways, maybe she is right. I do feel responsible for her pain. Ava and Claude spent the next 30 minutes explaining why that way of thinking was unhelpful, and then they all went to sleep. Rob woke up feeling surprisingly refreshed, even though he hadn't slept much. Talking with his friends had helped him feel better, and he was full of energy that morning. The kids noticed right away, especially during the campfire breakfast of bacon and egg tacos he prepared. Ava and Claude woke up slowly, so Rob left them a note. He called the security team on the radio to tell them he was taking the kids on a hike and shared the trail name. He chose the 4-mile Basin Loop Trail, which many say is easy for kids aged 8 to 11 and for people like him. The trail was beautiful and scenic, and it took us near the store on the way back. We stopped to shop for shirts and souvenirs. Wearing our new shirts from Big Bend National Park, we enjoyed ice cream as we walked back to the campgrounds. Eva wanted a shirt like ours, and Claude wanted our ice cream, so they decided to walk straight to the store. The kids wanted to join them to buy more treats. Rob stayed behind to clean up after breakfast and prepare for the day's big adventure rafting in Santa Elena Canyon. Everyone could go rafting because all the kids were at least 8 years old. Our half-day tour would not start until noon, so we had plenty of time. It took 2 rafts, one for part of the security team, while the other members watched from the canyon walls. Things had calmed down, but we had already learned 2 important lessons about letting our guard down when we still had enemies. So we decided to be cautious. We had fewer enemies now. Some were in jail, some had moved far away, and Robert had met an unfortunate end due to his roommate, who had a taste for rough play. It seemed No and Robbie were experimenting in a risky way when things went too far. I wasn't too bothered by it since I didn't have a part in it, but it was one less concern for me. In my view, Robert got what he deserved, not because of Caitlin or for trying to harm me, but because his followers had hurt many innocent people caught in their plans. The Department of Justice had started a special investigation into claims that women were held against their will at Serge's Hotel. It seemed like a political move to me, but Tom Yonkers assured me it was a serious matter with important people involved. I laughed and said, "With so much money involved, I hope they can resist $10 million in bribes." Tom didn't share my amusement. Trust me, they can. I let the matter go, but we kept an eye on the investigation. As sealed charges began to appear, powerful people started to panic, and expensive law firms began attacking the victim's credibility. I started to think the investigation might be genuine. Still, we watched closely. There was always the dark web option if justice didn't happen. This was our first rafting adventure, and it couldn't have gone better. The river was perfect, our guides were fun, and a nice breeze made the summer heat enjoyable, especially with the water spray around us. We shouted and laughed a lot, having a fantastic time. The kids kept asking, "When can we do this again, Dad? Please." I spoke with our guides, who recommended a full-day trip later in the year when it would be less crowded and the weather nicer. I felt a bit disappointed, but the kids quickly moved on to their next excitement. "I'm hungry!" We used the grills at the campsite to cook hot dogs and sausages and our propane stove for canned pork and beans. We had a big bag of Fritos and dip, along with cold Dr. Pepper and ginger ale. It turned out to be a tasty meal. Ava, Claude, and I stayed up later, but without any drinks. Claude had some news. Clay and his team would be replaced by Esteban and his group, and Clay would join us at La Kiva tomorrow night. I asked once more about Caitlin's recovery, but Claude had no updates. I hoped to learn something important the next evening. I went to bed soon after, while the others stayed up talking quietly. They were still talking when I fell asleep. The smell of coffee, fresh bread baking, and sizzling bacon, along with the chatter of 4 lively kids, got them up earlier the next morning than they wanted. But soon we were all fed and ready for our hike to the Eye. The kids were older now, so it wasn't as tough as it had been 2 years ago. Everyone enjoyed it and took tons of pictures at the Eye. I thought about Caitlin climbing over the rocks in her shorts and flashing me a smile as we walked back. No matter what, she was hard to forget. We brought Duke with us to La Kiva, because he had been alone too much lately and needed his family around. Clay arrived about 30 minutes later, looking happy to see us. The way he greeted everyone and hugged me made me feel better, and any bad feelings melted away. I let him have a couple of beers and told us how the Arizona desert felt hotter than the Texas desert. He also shared stories about the beautiful garden spot they were watching over but couldn't visit. Then I asked, "Have you seen Caitlin at all?" He looked worried. "I've seen her 3 times since we dropped her off. Once was 2 days later when they needed to check her story, which was accurate. The second time was 3 weeks ago. She asked for me, so they let me talk with her in a room with her counselor and a big guard. I couldn't believe how little she had changed since we left the hospital. She said she had been having a bad dream over and over and wanted to make sure Doss, Grace, and you were okay. I told her you were, but you all missed her. She started to cry a bit, and they thanked me for coming and then took me out quickly. The third time was the day before yesterday. Same room and serious people, but Caitlin looked better. She even seemed a bit brighter, but she still looked so thin and frail that it was hard to recognize her. Anyway, she asked if I had heard from you. I said no, since I was right here and hadn't talked to you. She wanted to know if you were with Eva. I told her no. Claude and Eva were together, and added that Eva had opened a clinic in Fort Davis. She wanted to know about that, so I told her what I knew. Then she asked if you were seeing anyone else. I told her no one had said anything to me about that. She switched the topic to the kids, asking if they were going to school and when it started. She also wanted to know if their old email addresses still worked. I said I wasn't sure, but I could find out. She said not to worry, she'd try them herself. Then they took me out. I don't know what to say, boss. If she'd looked as bad this time as before, I would have called you to break her out. But she had definitely improved since 2 days ago. I called the kids over. With school out for the summer, do you guys still check your email accounts? No, Dad. All our friends reach out to us through texts or calls. Only the teachers send emails, but they aren't at school yet. Grace, can you check your email on your phone right now? You might have a message, someone said. Oh, it says I have 59 emails, but I bet they are all junk, Grace replied. Just check, please. Doss frowned as he looked at his own phone, while Grace appeared a bit annoyed but started to check as well. Dad, who is McKade at Yahoo? Doss asked. Hi, my angels. It's been so long since I've seen you. I bet you've grown so much. I'm really sorry I had to leave, but I was very sick after we got back from Mexico, and this was the best place for me to get better. My doctors and counselor have helped me figure out a lot about what was making me unwell, and I've been taking the medication they prescribed. I now have a personal trainer who works me really hard twice a day, and I'm feeling much healthier. Part of my workout is kickboxing, and when we're done, I'm worn out. Since I've been training so much, I don't need to take as much medicine. I sleep well and feel much better. They say I still have more to learn and do before I'm completely well, but I want you to know I'm working hard so I can come back home to you. I can't talk on the phone or do video calls just yet, but I can email. Okay, enough about me. How are you both? I'd love to get an email from you sharing all about your summer, your friends, and anything else you want me to know. If you need Daddy or your uncles to help you write it, I'm sure they will be happy to assist. My trainer is waiting, so I'm off to work out. I love you both and can't wait for your emails. With all my love, Mommy. Grace and Doss felt both happy and confused. The most important question was, how long will Mommy be gone? But we had no answer. I offered to take them home to help them write back, but they weren't ready to leave their group of friends just yet. Grace said she wanted to think about it and write her answer on her phone tomorrow. Doss agreed and hurried back to join their friends. Eva thought the email was very encouraging, and everyone seemed to feel the same way. I felt like the kids did. El Gato leaned back in his chair, took a long drink from his bottle, and looked at me. Something else interesting just happened that you should know about El Rico. Remember that ranch on the Marfa Highway called the Crescent Moon? You mean the place where Ronaldo's helicopter and SUVs came from? Yes, I remember it well. The owner is in trouble with the authorities for several reasons related to their investigation into the lists the ladies at the hotel made. His business is struggling and he needs to raise money for his defense. He is selling a ranch and 10 sections of land located between your home and the Eagle Mountains to the west. Usually, even someone well-off like you might need help to buy such a large piece of land, but he is looking for a quick cash deal. When I say quick, I mean you can name your price if you have the cash. That sounds interesting, but why would I want to buy it? I don't really need it. The ranch has a big, nice home with a large patio and a swimming pool. There are 2 big buildings that seem to be warehouses, a paved airstrip with 2 hangars and a helipad. There are also some concrete pads that seem to be for special equipment, or so the sheriff says. You might consider buying it to keep it out of the hands of your rivals, of which you have plenty. Claude perked up and added, Rob, we should check out that place before you decide. If you're keeping the Lairs as your homes, We should think about placing some teams nearby, but not inside your houses. Clay and I think we need a helicopter, and this sounds like a great setup for that. I don't usually keep millions in my checking account, so I'm not sure how quickly I could do this if I wanted to, but I'm open to checking it out. We're heading back to the mountains tomorrow anyway to get ready for school. Gatto, find out what you can and set up a time for us to look at it. Gatto smiled and held up a keychain. Got it. I'll let you know the details for our tour on Monday. We had enjoyed enough excitement for one night, and so had Eva and the kids. We gathered everyone and headed back to our home in the desert. It's funny to think of it that way. We had become a very large and varied family. Caitlin's email motivated me to get back into shape, committing to work out 3 times a week, run 3 times a week, hit the heavy bag more often, and spar a little. Claude referred me to Felix, a skilled trainer with experience as a Marine drill instructor. By the end of the first week, I was sore in ways I didn't know were possible. To add to my busy life, my headhunter contacted me saying she found the perfect candidate for a job and that we should meet. She sent over her credentials, and I was impressed. She is a West Texas girl from Andrews with degrees from Texas Tech, along with 6 years of experience at an investment bank in Dallas. I felt a bit intimidated about interviewing her. Wanting to see her in action, I flew to Dallas and went to her office. Her boss laughed when I inquired about her work performance. Check your portfolio. She has been managing your accounts for the last 2 years. Really? What happened to Bob? He got a new job. He's in Cincinnati now. Can I meet with her? I hate to say no, but I know she's looking for something new. It's better if she talks to you than to someone else. I'll set you up in conference room B. Ashley Parker walked in with a purse and a laptop. She had a smile that seemed forced. Before I could say anything, she looked ready to frown. Good afternoon, Miss Parker. I'm Robert McGregor, but I like to be called Rob. Her expression changed from surprise to worry. Oh, Mr. McGregor, I didn't know it was you. Let me get the drive with your accounts. She turned to leave. Please don't, Miss Parker. I'm not here about my accounts. I understand you applied for the administrative assistant position for the president of RR Enterprises. If I'm mistaken, I'm sorry for interrupting you. If I'm right, I'd like to discuss the position. She looked confused for a moment, but quickly gathered herself. She placed her laptop on the table, hung her purse on a chair, and took a seat next to me. I wanted to see how she would respond to being close. She adjusted her skirt and jacket, sat up straight, and looked at me steadily. I smiled again and offered my hand. She shook it and said, Ashley Parker, Mr. McGregor. It's nice to meet you in person. Robert Roy McGregor, Miss Ashley Ann Parker, and it's great to meet you. My friends call me Rob. I glanced at her resume and thought for a moment. Parker Andrews, is your dad Emmett Parker, the engineer? She looked surprised and proud. Yes, he told me he knows you. I know him well. We've worked together a lot in the Permian and Delaware areas. He's a smart and skilled engineer, one of the best. I didn't realize his daughter was managing my accounts here. You and I haven't spoken in the 2 years I've been handling your accounts, Mr. McGregor. Since your investment accounts are under Solitario Investments, I didn't make the connection with RR Enterprises when I applied. So, the position I'm talking about is assisting Robert Roy, right? She asked with a small smile. I nodded and began to explain the job. I mentioned the unusual hours, frequent travel, and trips that could take her to far-off and less comfortable places. Handling many projects at once can be a challenge. You have to keep everything organized and moving smoothly. Good skills in planning and managing tasks are really important. You also need to build and keep strong relationships with all kinds of people, from hard workers to wealthy investors, as well as important visitors from other countries. Having good tech skills is necessary, along with the ability to research information and share it clearly. Being able to listen, think, and solve problems quickly is also essential. Strong speaking, writing, and listening skills are key. I watched her closely as I shared the list of what we needed. She didn't seem bothered at all. Instead, her bright blue eyes lit up. Her face showed excitement, and her body language reflected her eagerness to take on the challenges. She shifted in her seat, which made it clear she was ready for action. I was trying to give her a gentle warning about the job, but it was clear she was excited rather than discouraged. Instead of continuing to list the obstacles, I asked her for her thoughts. She responded with confidence and energy. Without any notes, She shared why she would be great for the role, starting with her experiences in the oil fields, her college background, her internships, and her impressive work at the investment bank where she managed important clients. I was so impressed that I considered offering her the job right away. However, I knew my colleague Claude wouldn't be happy if I hired someone without a complete background check, so I suggested we meet for dinner to talk more. She happily agreed, and I suggested Town Hearth or YO Steakhouse in the West End. This was a little test, and she passed. "If you don't mind, I prefer YO a bit more," she said. "Okay, then wear boots and jeans, and I'll send a car at 6:30. "Boots and jeans work for me, and I'll take an Uber," she replied. I smiled and agreed. She seemed down to earth, and I hoped this would go well. Ashley Ann Parker arrived in the Uber with just a few minutes to spare. She was tall and graceful, standing around 5'9", and she moved with confidence. I met her at the restaurant entrance, and we greeted each other, with me letting her go in first, which I soon realized was a mistake because she certainly caught my attention. She ordered a draft beer, and I chose a Lone Star draft. She smiled and mentioned Dad's favorite beer. "For tonight, I'm Rob. Can I call you Ashley?" I asked. "You can, or my friends and family call me Ash," she replied. We talked as we ordered our medium-rare steaks, salads, and asparagus. She was smart, friendly, and very engaging. I was starting to see past her striking features and impressive figure, but I couldn't deny that it was hard not to notice. Could I handle working with someone so captivating every day? Long trips, staying in hotels, socializing with clients late into the night. How could I not be tempted? She would be my employee, which meant I needed to keep things professional. It wasn't a strict rule, but it was better for everyone involved. But it was difficult to ignore how attractive she was. She was tall, with a graceful body and an engaging face that drew you in. Her smile and those lovely eyes made it even harder to concentrate. When the food arrived, she dug in with enthusiasm, and our light conversation ended. After we finished eating, she shifted the conversation to work. I encouraged her to ask anything, and she fired off several thoughtful questions. It was clear she understood the job requirements and what would be expected. Once we talked through her questions, I needed to mention a couple more things. "Are you aware that I have some people who wish to cause me trouble?" I mentioned we might travel to some risky places, but even just getting home lately has been problematic. "I know about the attempts on your life and the troubles with your family," she replied. "I read that you offered a reward for their safe return." My father mocked those stories, suggesting you must have moved money into an offshore account because there's no way you weren't involved. He shared tales of your journeys and the deals you made in various parts of the world. "I was aware of all that before I applied 3 days ago." She shrugged with a smile. "I'm looking for some excitement because working in investment banking just isn't cutting it. So, Ash, would you like to join RR Enterprises and find some of that excitement?" "I would love to." "What about the salary?" "Oh, you're going to pay me too? Well, whatever you think is fair is fine with me." "Welcome aboard. When do you want to start?" "I wish I could start yesterday, but I need 2 weeks to train my replacement." "One more thing. My work involves a lot of strong personalities. You are truly stunning, and we will be around many men who are used to getting their way, particularly with women." She leaned a little closer, touched my knee gently, and with a playful smile said, "I won't use my looks to get ahead, Rob, but I know the impact they can have when necessary." She gave my leg a light squeeze and leaned back, clearly amused by my reaction. Finally, I managed to say, "And I must admit, you could do so effectively." That night, I stayed at the nearby Omni Dallas and flew out first thing in the morning. Claude picked us up at the Blue Mountain Airport and drove us to the Crescent Moon Ranch, where Ron, also known as Gato, was waiting for us. "I hope you found an assistant because it's getting harder to keep up with you," he said. "I did find one. You'll meet her in about 2 weeks. She's the daughter of Ann and Emmett Parker, so I wasn't really worried about her background, but Claude checked and found nothing suspicious." I hope she's not someone you'll get into trouble with." I sighed. "She'll take some getting used to, but she's really smart, which is good for an assistant. Now show me what you want me to buy." It looked great, but it was going to cost too much. I told Ron I couldn't afford it along with the ranch. "Claude, how much did his lawyers want?" Ron asked. After hearing the number, Ron replied, "Do you have that much ready?" "Yes, if I cash out of some investments, but that's still not close to what the place is worth. He'd have to be crazy." "Or in a tough spot," Ron responded. "Let's make him a cash offer and see what he thinks." "Go for it. You're the agent here. Just let me know how it goes." "Want to see the big ranch?" he asked, waving the keys. "The gate is just down the road from yours." "Sure. I have nothing else to do, like managing businesses." We drove around for a while, and I was relieved I didn't have the money to buy it. It had potential, but not much had been done except for some roads and a few cows and goats for tax reasons. "Let's head back. I want to be home when the kids get back from school, and I know Felix is ready to pester me first." The kids were happy to see me, even though I was tired and barely had the energy to listen to their stories about their new teachers. The next morning, I noticed something was off when I went to get my coffee. I joined them on the patio. "Claude showed us some pictures of your new assistant," Chris, also known as Coyote, said with a smile. "Gato thought you said she was ugly, and we wanted to clarify what you meant." "I said she'd take some getting used to, not that she was ugly. How do we rate them? Are we using a 10-point scale?" "Yes, and stop avoiding the question." I'm not sure. Maybe a 12, 13? "Oh, wow." I went back for more coffee, and this time Ron was smiling. He held up his phone. "Do you have the money ready yet?" "What? No, why?" "Because he accepted your offer along with $25,000. "Really? We got the Crescent Moon for that? That's unbelievable. The guy must be very desperate and a little crazy." "Crescent Moon in the 10 sections," he said with a big smile. "What? Now I really think he's lost it." After breakfast, I called my financial advisor. She answered in her professional tone, which still sounded appealing, maybe because I imagined her. "Ash, this is Rob. I need quite a bit of money by Friday. Someone is in trouble with the law and is selling some good property quickly that's close by." "Good morning, Mr. McGregor. It sounds like you're having another busy day. I wish I could be there. How much do you need?" I told her the amount, and she asked if she could call me back in an hour. I agreed and then called her dad. "Emmett, this is Rob. How are you?" "I'm doing well, Rob, and before you ask, my wife is as wonderful as always. I'll let her know you're still waiting for her to kick me out." "Hi, Rob," Ann called from the background. "Hi, gorgeous. Ready for a younger, healthier guy yet?" "Well, I might be, Rob, but I don't like sharing my men with my daughter. Is she really going to work for you?" "That's why I called. I want to make sure you both are okay with it. Honestly, she would be a great fit, but I'll step back if you have any worries." "Worries?" Emmett laughed. "Honestly, I can't trust you around my wife for more than a few minutes, and my sweet, young, innocent daughter wants to work with you for long hours and travel everywhere, huh?" "Emmett, she's about Rob's age, and she's been married before," Ann added. He laughed and said, "Just teasing him. I knew he'd be concerned." "Of course we don't mind, Rob. This is a huge chance for her, and she's more excited than when I gave her a car for her 16th birthday. Just take good care of my little girl." "That's the main reason for my call. You might have heard about some trouble I've been in lately." I could hear Emmett snort and Ann chuckle softly. "It seems I've made some enemies I don't even know. I've got teams watching my back, but things still seem to go wrong. Sorry about that, Ann." "No need to apologize, Rob. I live with a husband who can't finish a thought without a bit of fuss." The call was quiet for a few seconds before Emmett said, "I trust you and your team. Besides, you guys caused quite a stir across 2 countries, and don't try to tell me you weren't involved. Anyway, it seems you've made a good impact on your enemies, and now that that troublesome Robert is out of the picture, I bet things will calm down for you." I sighed. "I hope you're right about that. Now let me check that neither you nor Ann minds me hiring Ash. Ashley. You heard my husband's strong opinion, and I have to say I agree with what he said about Robert. I want you to know that I'm completely fine with it. She's a smart and ambitious girl, and being around someone like you will help her a lot. Please take good care of her, and let us know if things aren't going well with her as your assistant. She can be a bit much sometimes." "A bit much?" "After meeting her, I'm thinking of making her the CEO, and I'll be her assistant. I'm sure everything would be more organized, and we'd see better results." "Hey, a little change in your life won't hurt," Emmett said with a smile. "But don't forget to trust your instincts. You seem to have a knack for knowing things that others don't, even without all the details." So don't let our very organized and research-loving daughter who's focused on her career change that. You might not always get things right, but I believe you have a special skill when it comes to investments. Anne and I wouldn't have this nice ranch and home without your insights, and Ash could go to college for 6 years without debts. Don't let her influence that. With that advice in mind, I shifted my focus to some regular business. I had to find a good opportunity to make up for a risky investment I had just made, so I reached out to my connections. Luckily, I found one, but it was in a bit of an uncertain area of Eastern Europe. A company in the oil industry was planning to explore some untapped pockets of gas in Hungary. For context, orphaned means there are no pipelines nearby, and wet gas is a mix of oil and gas. The upstream part refers to looking for and retrieving the resources, while midstream is about transporting them to factories for processing. Not to get into the political situation in Hungary, but it's led by a group that has a loose grip on power and is friendly with Russia, which makes things a bit unstable. Still, my partners believe it's worth the risk. This deal could bring in a lot of money quickly if I can negotiate an agreement with the government to start the pipeline and drilling work. That will be tricky since some of the work needs to be done with local companies, and some fees will need to be paid for permits, not bribes. Bribes are against the law. If I can negotiate a good deal, I would receive some money upfront and a share of the oil and gas produced. That share is where the real income comes from over time, even if it is just a small percentage. Usually, I get a slightly higher percentage, but this time I'm asking for more upfront money and less after production starts. In this case, my share is non-participating, meaning I won't invest in the deal. I will just facilitate it. I look at my watch. It's almost 11 in the morning. I have contacts in Hungary, and some of them might be free, even though it's nearly 6 in the evening there. I decide to send some friendly emails today and follow up early tomorrow. This gives me time to sort out details on the American side before I decide whether to go into the complicated area of South-Central Eastern Europe. Claude isn't very happy about the upcoming deal, but Clay feels fine about it. He says, "I'll go and I'll just need 3 others. We will be okay. There are some untrustworthy people in that area for sure, but unless there's a new price on Rob, we should be safe." Business paused when the kids came home from school, but I had worked out a very good deal with CCM. Limited. They will cover travel costs for me, my assistant, and a 4-person security team for 2 weeks. And the bonus from getting a good deal from the government will help pay for the ranches I've just bought or will buy when Ash provides the funds. It's been over an hour, so I call her, and she has a plan ready. If you agree, the bank will provide the funds once you give the go-ahead, using an equal value of your investments as security. I'm sending you the forms. Please sign them in front of a notary, scan them, and send them back. Send the original documents by courier as soon as you can. I know you suggested selling some of your investments to buy the property, but everything is doing so well that taking a low-interest loan instead will be better. If you want, I can start on that right away. "No, Ash, this is a better option," I said, "and thank you for your help. I'll call you with the funding instructions as soon as they are ready." Claude is excited about the purchases going through, so excited, in fact, that he wants to lease parts of the Crescent Moon for a project. The purpose of the 2 large warehouse-like buildings is still unclear because Ron and Claude can't open them. No key works, and the doors are made of very heavy steel. It is both suspicious and intriguing. Ron was working with the former owner to gather more information and gain access through the keypads. We also had an expert who knew how to handle these complicated locks. What could they possibly keep inside that needed such high security but were willing to leave behind? It felt strange and secretive. That night, we discovered the answer. To be exact, it was just after midnight. Our watchers noticed 2 large helicopters approaching the Crescent Moon from the south. At the same time, they saw 2 trucks coming in on Highway 118 from Marfa. They alerted Claude and Clay, who then woke me, and I contacted the sheriff. We met him near the tomato greenhouses on Texas 118. He was in the driver's seat of his armored Humvee with his chief deputy at the wheel. We climbed into the open seats. The vehicle, followed by 2 others, parked outside the ranch entrance for several minutes. The watchers told us that the helicopters had landed and turned off their engines, and the trucks were backed up to the loading docks of the two warehouses. When they reported that the doors had opened and men were going inside, we drove onto the ranch, with two Suburbans full of men following us. The watchers had seen at least a dozen armed men exit the helicopters. We drove with our lights off, using only the red fog lights on the Humvee to keep our path clear. The driver stopped before we reached the last hill before the ranch headquarters. Everyone except the sheriff, his deputy, and I got out. The Suburbans parked in a way that blocked the road. We gave those on foot time to reach their positions and then drove over the hill, past the houses, and toward the warehouses. An armed lookout was leaning casually against the wall of the first warehouse, smoking. When he finally noticed us, he shouted something and pointed his rifle at the armored Humvee. Armed men rushed out of the warehouse, looked toward him, and started firing. Unfortunately, most of them dashed out the door, stopped, looked around, and ended up exposed while shooting at us. The powerful weapon made quick work of them and of two who tried to get to the truck. Some of our men reached the first warehouse door just after the shooting stopped, while others headed toward the helicopters. We could hear more shots coming from inside the warehouses, but then that too went quiet. The driver hurried us on toward the second building, and we faced more gunfire from men gathered outside. Before Sheriff Goodson could respond, the men began to fall, so he shot at a few hiding behind some stacked fence posts to his right. I learned something important that night. Fence posts can't stop big bullets, even when stacked high. It was hard to tell who was who because the gunfire had really destroyed their remains. But the locked doors were now open, and we learned something else important. The warehouses were full of advanced weapons. Unless they had a large group to arm, these were likely for sale. We talked about possible buyers, quickly dismissing the obvious drug cartels and gangs, since it made no sense to bring weapons into the U.S. just to sell them to people in Mexico. It was easier to keep and sell them there. Could it be domestic terrorists or some type of militia? There was no way to figure that out with the few clues we had. There were many valuable items here, but the biggest finds were 12 Russian SAM-7S, surface-to-air missiles able to take down anything from a military plane to a passenger jet. The sheriff was not happy about the large stockpile we had found, because he knew it would lead to a big federal investigation. Our lives would change for a while. I called Tom Yonkers and wondered if he ever took a break when he picked up on the second ring. "Sorry to bother you, General, but I really need your advice in person. Could you fly over to my place tomorrow? I'll cover your costs." Tom is not a fool. He paused for a moment before responding. "If you're asking, this must be important. I'm up and ready so I can be there in time for coffee and tacos." We carefully recorded and took videos of the crates of weapons and missiles, secured the area, and returned to our base to wait for Tom Yonkers. 2 teams remained, one for security and the other to move the bodies into the refrigeration units we found in each warehouse. We locked the gate behind us when we left. Tom landed at Blue Mountain 7 hours after our call, so he really had left right away. We had eaten and were on our 3rd pot of coffee, but Maria made fresh tacos when he arrived with his ultimate security team, along with 2 of his own guards. Even with the jammers on, we had talked very little in the meantime. The sheriff seemed to hope this was all just a bad dream, and maybe if we didn't talk about it, it might just disappear. I think he was happier to see General Tom Yonkers than I was. Maybe he could come up with a plan. The others went to get the kids ready and take them to school, stopping by to say hello before they left. I let the kids eat, hugged each one, and gave Doctor a warm embrace too. Ava returned to the group on the patio. Tom said, "Well, I've heard enough. Now I need to see for myself. Let's go." And we did. 90 minutes later, Tom remarked, "Rob, you always bring some kind of chaos, but this is something else. Everything in here there's a lot is either from Russia or China, and it's all military grade. We have 2 big problems. First, what do we do next? Second, you know no one will believe your story. After that incident with the North Koreans and the rescue in Mexico saying, 'Yes, I just bought this ranch, but I had no idea it was a weapons stash,' isn't going to convince anyone, at least after they've finished questioning you. The sheriff and I thought about just setting this all on fire and driving off fast, but we might lose some land if we do. So, do we call the ATF and send you away until they figure this out? Because as it stands, I can see you in a tough spot. I've had some time to think, so hear me out. I know it sounds crazy, but just listen. First, we definitely need the ATF involved. The United States needs to know where this stuff came from, who brought it, how it got here, and where it's headed. Second, I've been to Bolivia and Cuba, and I'd prefer to avoid both. Third, and this is where it gets complicated, they left us the trucks and helicopters meant for transport, but I doubt 2 trucks will be enough. Anyway, let's do what they were planning to do and get it all out of here. I can see 2 trucks being reported as abandoned somewhere near Presidio, Del Rio, or Fort Stockton, with the local police and border patrol finding a real surprise, maybe even some evidence of what happened here. I don't want to drive the truck with the missiles, assuming they even fit. I don't really have a plan for them. Using the helicopters seems too risky even at night. We'd likely be seen. So, with this unconventional idea, what do you think? Everyone shook their heads, some with their eyes closed. With a confused look on his face, Tom finally spoke up. It's risky. It's unlikely. It's absurd. But right now, I don't have a better idea. Claude, Clay, can we avoid leaving any traces when we load things? We have the gloves they left. We have forklifts. We might even have hazmat suits we can use. But we have to be careful and can't move too quickly. And who knows who else might be on their way. There are millions of dollars in advanced weapons here, even without counting the missiles. Someone else will want to collect this stuff if these guys don't show up at their meeting point. I guess we have until later tonight since they didn't seem to be in a hurry. Thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe to Infidelity Plus to stay updated with more captivating tales of infidelity and payback. Turn on notifications so you're the first to see our latest content.